I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
You could say that.
I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up.
Welcome everybody. This is Team Rabbit Hole Edition 306 with Pontius and Pio. I want to say
Pio.
Pio.
And it is Pontius Pilot. Good illusion. All right, so really quick blip. Pontius and Pio, like he said, what happens when two hyper fixated Italian Warhammer fans humorously create content for the master nerd and total noob alike? Join the team as we chat about the hashtag Grim Darkness of the Far Future with Pontius and Pio, the heresy-posting duo that explore the 40k meta-fictional universe. What's up, guys? Hopefully they could hear me.
Pio, you go first this time?
So sorry. No, usually he starts. I'm good.
Bene. As I said, they're Italian. Before we get into so it's a beautiful little accent. I mean, I'm not hating at all. Accents. I don't have one. Raphael's got one. Y'all have them. So the English accent is great. What we typically start with on the podcast, though, briefly, is to pull a card. I don't know, Raphael, if you're going to, but ironically, I pulled the Three of Cups. This guy, he's probably heritage is Italian. His name is David DeAngelis. He's been on the podcast a few times. He's a Brit. But the Three of Cups, if you guys don't know, it's about like emotional celebration. I'm here to be celebrated. Connecting with the energy of shared celebration, raising your vibrations with others, enjoying the moment with friends, a satisfying communion. So, as they say in Twin Peaks, drink deep. If you're into 40K or if you're not, you're about to get bamboozled by 40K stuffs. Raphael, did you want to pull a card or no?
A party card, I'll take it.
All right, yeah, three of cups. So, are you guys into tarot at all or not really?
Not really. They are usually not considered something good in Italy. They are more considered to the span of witchcraft. So
that's a good point, actually.
Yeah, I know. And it's funny because if people are into the lore at all, Malcador the Sigillite uses this. Some of the best writing I've read in the Horus Heresy, the Dan Abnett book towards the end of the death. One of those books. I don't want to give too much away, but the Emperor doing his trip with Horus is some of like it's straight up archetypal stuff. So it even bleeds into 40K, the whole idea of tarot and these archetypes. So we'll get into 40K proper in a second. I just want to kind of get a bearing on who we're talking to. These avatars that we're looking at are from their YouTube channel, but Pontius and Pio are in Italy. I've had the privilege of being there for 2 weeks and checking out Venice and Rome and Florence at some point in 2017. I was smoking a lot of hash while I was on that, and I don't speak Italian, so it was an interesting trip. But to the degree you want to speak about it, what part of Italy are you guys from? How is that? What kind of culture did you grow up in? Hyper religious? Not so. I'm just trying to get an idea of like how did you guys even fall into 40K at all?
Pio, you go first because you always complain that I take the word too much. So
and I never complained about that.
So Pio, are you from North Italy, South Italy? Where are you from?
North Italy, near the rural parts of Venice.
All right, cool. That's what's up. It's a beautiful area. I got to check it out, like I said. A lot more touristy than I was expecting. A lot more cramped. But I got to, like I said, I smoked some hash in a park. Like there's a fucking park in Venice, like with trees and stuff. You'd never think that.
No, you're thinking mainline Venice while he's speaking more about the rural parts. I visited Pio like a couple of years ago. I can say it personally, having been born and grown up in a shithole, even where he lives is a shithole. So
okay. There's a lot of art history there, a lot of beauty, but I mean, it felt like because I was living in Switzerland for about a year and near Montreux, up near Lake Geneva. And when I took the bus over, it's funny. Basically, I passed out, and I had been staying past the Schengen agreement or whatever, past 3 months, and we get to the Italian border, and there's dudes with like little fedoras and like M16s, and they're checking everybody's passports and stuff. And as soon as we crossed over, I was like, we ain't in Switzerland no more. This is definitely a different vibe. So you guys are Italian. I'm kind of curious. What kind of are you guys like? Were you raised hyper religious? I know you're kind of shying away from the tarot because of the witchcraft heresy involved, but what kind of culture did you guys grow up in, and how did you turn on to this Games Workshop universe?
Personally, I grew up pretty much in an agnostic family, so I don't have that much ties to religious stuff. I see religion more as a tool than a real instrument of faith. I do not criticize the people that believe. Everyone needs to have beliefs of their own. It is just something not for me personally, but generally not really. It is just common knowledge that in Italy, like tarots and such, were always seen as some kind of dark acts to commit. Not really heresy per se, but almost. I think it is probably the remnant of like the hyper-religious culture of the 1800s and 1900s. Especially when it comes like to gypsy caravans and such, that the kind of the kind of culture was very heavy, at least when I was little. But now it is almost gone. It is just common knowledge, at least for me, that the tarots are not really that famous in Italy, because there is still that mentality that they were an instrument of the devil. So
that's what's up. And so I mean, Pio, jump in. Obviously, tag team. This kind of like a wrestling match. Did you grow up in a religion? I mean, I don't care about religion. I'm just trying to get an idea of like you're coming from agnostic, so I'm guessing the whole kind of Roman Catholic battle sisters element and the ecclesiarchy and stuff resonates a little, but not exactly. So Pia, what kind of culture are you coming from? How, are you guys geeking out in the rain, like in terms of like reading this book stuff? I'm trying to just get my head around how you fell into this rabbit hole, because it's the best rabbit hole ever, 40K. But what kind of culture are you guys coming from?
My family was actually pretty much was pretty Christian, but we didn't saw tarot as the instruments of the devil like Danny was. So I actually done some things with tarot and bring them at my house, and we tried to do something with them, even though we didn't know how to use them. So I know tower is bad. Just that. I don't.
Tower's bad. Tower's Magnus kicking in the door by Magnus is at fault. See, a lot of people aren't going to get these jokes. Some people might. I know you all will. So all right. So jumping straight into it, because we don't have to geek out too hard on y'all personally. I'm just because I know Pontius is a Leo and Pio is a Capricorn in realidad in terms of astrology. I don't have their charts or anything, but how did you guys first hear about 40K? Like obviously Pontius, you're more into the lore, so I don't think you're sitting around assembling armies and painting them per se. But how did you even hear about this?
As I explained even in one of my videos, I actually found out about 40K while I was traveling on the bus between my city and the city where the university I studied in was. I was very much bored, as I did every time that there was this travel, because it was a good 4 hours long every time on the bus. I was just going around YouTube and such. And I ended up on the review of Mandalore Gaming of the Ultimate Apocalypse mod for Dawn of War Soulstorm, and I recognized some of the characters, some of the armors and weapons, and oh my god, give me a second, I need to sneeze. Okay, and pretty much what I ended up recognizing was Space Marine armor, bolters, and such. And I was capable of tracking them back to a series of videos I had already seen at the time, which was the first 2 parts of the Astartes series, because at the time there wasn't anything but the first 2 parts. And I was like, this looks cool. I'm very curious. What is this about? Because like in the Astartes series, it is very boring, very gray colors. There is fighting, but there isn't really that much hype eye candy for it. Then you
Hmm.
go in the Dawn of War Soulstorm mods, and you find giants fighting other giants, demons, orcs, Eldar Titans fighting Imperial Titans and such. And from there, I started doing research and learning English at the same time because I didn't speak it at the time.
What?
And yeah,
This
I
is how you
actually
got
learned,
into English? 40K?
yeah, I learned English in 6 months between bus trips by listening to Luetin, pretty much speak about the lore.
Luton is the man. We can talk about that in a second. So, what year was that though when you turned on to this?
2019.
Okay, so relatively recently. Man, you're crushing it given the fact that you're just into it. Good English, by the way. I mean, you're hot off the non-speaking situation. Pio, did Pontius get you into it, or how were you aware of 40K?
My story with 40K, how it started, it's really simple. I was in a Discord call with Danny, and he asked me, like, it was like 5 or 4 years ago, "Hey, Pio, you know Warhammer 40K?" I said no. He started talking for like 3 hours. I didn't want to listen to him, but he continued. So after 1 year, after 1 year and a half of him talking of it, I started appreciating it.
It percolated in like a good coffee. It takes a second, an espresso. It's like a beautiful thing. So so you were getting the secondhand smoke from Pontius. That makes total sense.
More like he was my first victim that I was using to lore dump on because I had nobody else to talk about 40K with.
Isn't it beautiful? I mean, I know Raphael feels this, and Andreas and other people who, because like I've said on the podcast, sometimes it comes up and it gets so overwhelming for me personally to even be able to speak about it that it's like, where do we even begin? I'll just say briefly, I during right after COVID, I went through a huge breakup with a girl that I was engaged to that I'd never met. Long story there, but anyway, I broke up with her. I started drinking and getting kind of like, what is life? I'm a nihilist, all this stuff. And for some reason, I turned on to Luton and his lore, and I would just sit there and listen. And I mean, I grew up, I'm wearing a Star Wars shirt, so Star Wars, Harry Potter books, Lord of the Rings, whatever, Narnia, fantasy and sci-fi are dope. Even the Arthur C. Clarke books, 2001: A Space Odyssey, all this cool stuff is out there. But as soon as I started hearing just not only the archetypal complexity, because it's not just like dudes in space fighting. I mean, it is. That's like kind of the front of it, the face of it. But the writing, the capacity of the writers, whether it's Dan Abnett or whoever, is so high caliber that people like yourself, Pontius, don't have to even be into the tabletop to appreciate the universe. It's like it's so big and vast and meta that it holds its own weight. It's really like the Philosopher's Stone, in my opinion. You can find anything in terms of story arc, right? Whether it's magic, in terms of psychics and psychers. I'm rambling, but anyway, I recently just turned on to it, and I don't play tabletop. I know, so people understand where this is even coming from. Basically, a company called Games Workshop created, if you want to put it, like a chess game with 2 armies, and there was some like blips of lore written where it's like, oh, there was this guy named Horus and he fell. Like, it was very vague stuff in the late 80s, and it's turned into a multi-million-dollar video games, books, you name it, franchise. So some people are into the painting and modeling aspect and don't even read the books. Some people like yourself and myself, Danny, are just geeks on the lore. And I mean, I haven't played the tabletop yet. So
Someone just commented, which is something that I actually sometimes like to play online, because if you just start collecting trading cards, you're sure to get broke. There's actually Warhammer 40K set in Magic. I just looked it up.
There's a crossover. Yeah.
That's
yeah,
crazy.
from what I understood, those cards actually suck. So
So they didn't even give it clout. They were just kind of like, here, we'll just suck in the fan base, I guess. All right. So before we really get deep, because I want to just like straight up drive with a snowplow through the fucking Alps of the mountain space that is 40K at some point. Before we do that, I mean, how I turned on to you, Danny, or the Pontius, is basically through your meme page. Team Rabbit Hole started as a meme page. It's a podcast now and stuff. So I'm all about memes and using humor. But where did the idea to create that meme page come from? And we can kind of get into some of heresy posting and get some of the concepts that come up in there a lot, because I think it's kind of a reaction to a lot of the subculture becoming too politically correct, if I'm not wrong. I mean, there's a lot of positive gatekeeping is usually thought of as a negative thing, but I think you've done a good job of trying to be like, the lore says this and there's a reason for this, and we can't just make Space Marines soft and whatever. So how did you start the meme page? Why did you start it? Tell us a little about Heresyposting.
Heresyposting was actually created pretty much almost second quarter of 2020. If I remember right, it should be in May 2020. Yeah.
So during the lockdowns.
What?
During the COVID
it
lockdowns.
was during the lockdowns. Yeah. The idea really wasn't my creation. We could say. I just like. I just like used the name for a joke in a now defunct group that was Starship Troopers bug posting that now got zacked, and now there is nuke posting, but it isn't as active as bug posting was. People actually were resonating with the names with the name in the comments, and they were all like, "Oh, I cannot find a group with a name and such." And I just decided, okay, because I was already banned from like 5 or 6 40k groups because I was already defending the lore at the time, because I actually had recognized the pattern of let's say the political correctness invasion of an hobby. Like you yourself said that you are a Star Wars fans. My condolences for the sequel trilogy. But
or even the newest movies are terrible. Like they weren't
yeah.
received very well because they're so progressive and so liberal is a strong word, but they're so open-minded that they lose the story.
And they are also very shittily written. Like they decanonize the expanded universe just to make canon Mary Sue after Mary Sue in the fucking movies anyway. And I decided that when I was pretty much tired of getting banned in 40k groups because I was around defending the lore against people that were just using their own emotions to dictate what should change in a narrative sense in a universe. I was like, okay, if I have to keep getting banned because people get offended at jokes or lore, then I will make my own group with Blackjack and hookers, to make a little citation, to have fun with and to have people around that are like-minded. They can enjoy a good joke without getting offended, even at just lore references, not even the joke itself. And I didn't expect it for it to go over like a few hundred people, maybe 1,000. Then it exploded to like 15,000 in the first month.
Blew up.
Yeah, and after that we kept growing and growing and growing. We ended up in various conflicts with other groups, and they ended up destroying their own reputation. Really, we didn't do that much work. Like there was a group called Adeptus Shitpostium that we had a beef with. At the time we were like the same size. They were 20,000. We were like 25,000. And like we had a pretty big beef with them because their admins like to insult me publicly in the group. And I was like,
ad hominem attacks, like at you personally.
Yeah, but they pretty much destroyed their own reputation when they went against an innocent guy that just had a Krieg army painted, and it was painted, I think, in World War II African Corps camouflage. It didn't have any symbols of and such from the Germans of Second World War. Like it was just a camouflage. And because it was Krieg, because it had the name Panzer Battalion, which translates literally into tank battalion, they started pretty much a campaign of harassment against him. They started insulting him publicly, started making posts insulting him publicly, sent, like, in the end, there were people...
Were they implying he was a Nazi or something?
Yeah, they were not implying it. They were saying
it. Right.
And it ended up with the guy even receiving death threats in his PMs, and he pretty much contacted the admins that refused to take down the post about him. After they refused, he was like, okay, then I'm suing you, and they removed the post. After that, they gave an half-assed apology that was pretty much, you shouldn't really include the names of the people you are critiquing inside your post because it could end badly, when it was actually a moderator that shared a post, so they were pretty much scolding the members for a mistake of one of their own moderators. And after that, like, we reached out to the guy and we were like, yeah, let them be, just come in our group, show us your army, we will love it. He joined, he showed us his army. He got like 800 reactions. Everybody liked it, a lot of comments of support. And after that, like, their group died. They destroyed their own reputation like that.
Gotta be careful. So if people aren't aware, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are geeks and get it and get the kind of whole cultural thing. Some of the issue and part of the entrance fee, if you want to put it that way, for even getting past the agreed, like, okay, 40K Warhammer and the whole universe is not meant to be like this really nice, safe place. It's like the worst possible timeline in a sense. It's realistic in that it's like our universe and Earth and all this stuff. Like it's not some parallel reality. It's like this is what happens after AI collapses, and there's a lot of lore here to back this up. But what tends to happen is people want very socially acceptable and gray and safe kind of like things, and this is a ultra violent. I mean, it doesn't promote violence in the sense of like everybody should go do this. I don't think it's showing people like a moral code particularly, though you can extrapolate that kind of thing from it, whether you're Lehman Russ and doing things for honor like a Viking or whatever. Like you can find morality within it. But it's what is your thought on like it being such a satire? Because I think it's like everything to like in Spinal Tap is like this imp goes to 11. It's like any cliche you can think of, whether it's the Ketchikan fighters in like, you know, Rambo style or whatever it is, like everything is turned up to 11 and cranked up to the blast. So when people, their sensitivities aren't like geared in the way to approach it that way, like they think that basically it's like a hyper right-wing fascist thing or something crazy. Like this is what people really want to see. And that's not what it is at all. In my estimation, it's like an amazing kind of rabbit hole of worst case scenario timelining or something like that. What are your thoughts on, you know, that whole idea, like, you know, progressive kind of soft liberalism and then gatekeeping and trying to keep real to the lore? You see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I disagree with the idea that 40K is satire. It
Okay.
has satirical elements. That is for sure. Everything has satirical elements because what we're creating comes from our own mind, comes from our own experience and knowledge. So we cannot really disconnect ourselves from our own human nature. So what we write is what we know. What we make up is made up of what we know, modified for what we think. And the main problem with the statement that 40K is satire instead of having satirical elements is that, as I explained in my video, about the Imperium are the good guys, satire really
Watch that. I gotta watch that.
Satire really dies when you make the situation, empire, ideology, whatever you want to put it, that you want to satirize in behavior completely and utterly justified as behavior, as ideology.
Right.
One of the example I brought inside the video, in fact, was the monodominant faction of the Inquisition. They are inquisitors that are part of the Inquisition, considered extremist because they're completely and utterly Puritan, and they believe that the galaxy should be only for humans and have devoted themselves to exterminating all alien life without any kind of regard for the kind of alien life, if it's sentient or not. They want them all dead. People now might see that as some kind of satire of some kind of real life hatred group or persecution of some hatred groups, but no, they actually had a point when that kind of ideology was created. Humanity in general during the Dark Age of Technology was the only faction that technically was friendly with the others. The only reason they weren't a constant war with like the orcs, the elders and such was that the elders kept to themselves because they were a post-scarcity society. The orcs pretty much understood, yeah, we don't have any kind of hope of defeating the humans, so it is even useless to fight because the humans at the time were very extremely powerful, and under that powerful they even had AIs that fought their own battles for them. They weren't the kind of battles that the orcs will consider fun, like a lot of fun. Like it is the reason they actually hate fighting the Tau, because the Tau are very, very similar to the Dark Age humans. And like it all goes like this: the fact that that humanity was the only one to actually offer any kind of peace, any kind of to extend an end, we could say, into keeping things peaceful. And after the cybernetic revolt, after the war against the machines and such, where humanity was brought on its knees, every single alien race of the galaxy, every single major alien race of the galaxy, actually turned against humanity and pretty much started slaughtering them. That brought pretty much the sentiment of humans from seeing aliens as sources of trade, diplomacy, knowledge, or even generally just something that they could deal with amicably, to just saying them, okay, kill them on sight. That is the reason humanity is so xenophobic in 40K, because they have past experiences. So knowing that not only humanity was betrayed more than once by more than one race and pretty much brought to the edge of extinction because of it, but the fact that 9 out of 10 alien races that are found around the galaxy are hostile against humans, can you really, in general, call satire a faction that wants to kill them all? Because I call it justified.
Yeah, no, yeah. When I said satire, I guess I mean more like, the Necrons or Terminator. Or
yeah,
whatever. Like,
that is a satirical element, but
Yeah.
there are people that actually believe when they hear satire that oh yeah, the Imperium is satirizing fascism or Nazism or whatever the fuck they think.
Right. Not a straight correlation like that.
Yeah, usually to that I always answer, okay, then if they are satirizing that, the Chaos is satirizing anarchists, because it is what they are. And they usually get very angry about that because, oh no. But yeah, generally, it has satirical elements, but it doesn't have real satire from the real world. Maybe it had in first edition, it had less in second edition. But from third edition onward, it became just sci-fi fantasy in space. So
right. In its own, it's holding its own weight, like I said, in its own universe. It's very cogent. It's not. I mean, there's things like the Eternals. Which some people hate that. I don't mind it. There's some lore where it's just like, whoa, this is harder to fit in. But generally speaking, I mean, we can kind of start geeking out about this. And Pio, feel free to jump in at any point. I mean, it's free for all. And Raphael, if you have any questions, about these, go ahead.
I'm listening.
What a good Capricorn. Okay, cool. So, but he's top shelf, guys. He's a Capricorn, so he knows what's going on. So, all right. I guess we can kind of get into. I mean, is there anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of like the concept of gatekeeping and keeping something pure in terms of the lore, the canon, versus and like fan politics and all that, or have you said your piece on that?
The concept of gatekeeping has been brought into the ground as being pretty much just the word associated with people wanting to keep newcomers at bay from any kind of hobby. The problem with that is actually that it isn't the definition of gatekeeping. That is the definition of elitist, not really a gatekeeper. Gatekeepers don't stop people from joining. They stop the wrong people from joining. And generally, I do think that gatekeeping is a very much needed part of any hobby, because the gatekeepers pretty much are quality control for the fandom. I do not keep people from playing. I do not keep people from learning. Like, I have no physical way of keeping somebody out of the hobby itself. But I can show people that the ideas of certain parts of the fandom are either idiotic or completely corrupt in their own ideology. And what that does is it makes people more and more hostile against certain ideologies. Which, sorry, I have my cats giving me a problem here. Come on.
Oh, they're cool. Cats are cool.
Yeah. And that pretty much means that gatekeepers end up being a quality control for the fandom that allows only the people that are open to learning and that are open to being part of the fandom in a very natural way to be part of the community. Because if you can be part of the community only if you... Okay, I sat down again. You can be part of the community only if you can be accepted by us. It doesn't mean that you like will be shunned because you like a faction or because generally you don't fit in with the group. The problem comes from your own ideology, because what you think of the fandom, and especially of the hobby itself, will dictate how people react to you. And pretty much it is, are you here to learn or are you here to cause problems? That is what gatekeepers stop. So,
because typically what happens, and I've seen a great meme I posted about it, where it's like there's a hobby or subculture, whatever it is. Like, let's just say it's baseball, and all of a sudden people are like, hey, I want to get in on that, and it's cool. Like, anybody can play baseball, but then it turns into like, well, I don't like the rules of baseball. I don't want to use a baseball bat. I want to use a super soaker instead. And in a progressive postmodern society that's democratic and usually like lets minority voices speak and stuff like that, we've become culturally, largely in the West, so soft to pandering that at some point it's not even going to be baseball. It's going to be, potentially worst case scenario, it's going to be a bunch of furries running around doing whatever and not even playing the game as such. And then you've lost the spirit of the original thing itself. Like it's a little like chaos corruption. If you let a little sludge in, it goes to shit really quick. So I hear you, and I do. It's a kind of everybody's personality is going to be very different on how they approach it. I think it's very good to be open minded and humanistic in the sense of like we're all in this together. We're all just trying to have fun down here on this planet and figure it out. But if certain terms aren't agreed upon, it loses the meaning of the participation ability at all. So if I say like this is an orange and someone's like I identify that that's an apple and it's an orange, it's like it gets really tricky to like talk about fruit in that metaphor. So some of what you're doing is like a reaction, if you want to put it that way, and I would say possibly a necessary reaction to just very specific issues within the canon where like female space marines and stuff like that. It's hard because I'm not I'm not an anti-woman misogynist or anything, and I don't think I can't speak for everybody in 40k fandom, but I don't think most men are misogynists. I think they're just like this because there are women in 40k, the Sisters of Sororitas, the Silent Sisters, people in the Guard, all sorts of Angron's, I forget her name, Natasha Saran or something like that. Like there's very strong women, Eldar, all sorts of stuff. So it's not like women aren't being represented, because sometimes what happens, it seemed like it was a representation thing. Like this is just a bunch of Northern European dudes being like circle jerking over fascism, and that was like the fear, I guess, at worst to some of these people. But then it turns into, unfortunately, something where people who don't give a shit about it come in and ruin the parade, and then nobody's, it kind of blows up in everybody's face. Anyway, we don't have to talk too much about that. I just didn't know. I mean, it felt appropriate to address it at some point because I think that's kind of part of not why you exist, but like your role in the scene, so to speak, is to be like, if you have, if you paid for tickets and you come to the concert, like, do you have tickets or not? Like, not anybody can just walk in. There's a price of admission. You have to like agree with certain presuppositions in terms of the ontology of the sandbox world. Like orcs are not human.
Let's just say that it is more like it is more of a concept of being part of an hobby. In the case of 40k, really requires effort. You cannot just come in, learn from a couple of memes, and say you are a 40k fan. No, in that case, you are just a tourist. You are just passing by. Especially if you don't have the will to learn even more. Or worse, you are here just because you are offended by the concept of something, you're offended by the content of something, and you are here to advocate for changes. The last people that should advocate for changes for something are people that don't know anything about it.
The tourists,
yeah. And generally, it all boils down to the effort people can put into learning. Like, I am one of the biggest 40k lore experts on the planet. Like, it is not...
Such a Leo. I believe it.
No, like, it is not even arrogance, because I've shown it I've shown it more than once that I can find stuff that some other people never noticed. Like, I don't know if you watched the video Bad Up War Part 5, but in Bad Up War Part 5, I pretty much created a theory that explains the chaos corruption of Euron connected to an artifact that I think the writers left some seeds to say, yeah, it was responsible for Euron going mad completely. And like, it was something that nobody else had ever actually noticed. I was the first one. And generally, it is just like, I know what I'm talking about when I approach 40k. I know more than most people will ever do in their life. Fuck, I know more than some of the writers. Just look at whatever the fuck C.S. Goto is doing with his books. But generally, if you do not even have a level of understanding of 40k to understand that the changes you're advocating go against the lore, like, because it is not even that there are people that try to justify lore changes using lore or maybe slight changes to the lore. No, it is always, oh no, change it completely because it's made up. If you think
or
like
it's
that,
offensive, usually people bring their offense in. And I mean, obviously you guys are Italians. I'll say this and we can move on. But it would be like a North American like myself going to Italy and being like, I'm really not that into pasta. In fact, you guys, let's get this off the menu entirely because the wheat fields were harmed in the process or whatever. It's like it's projecting of the personal politic that ruined the parade. So like I said, I might not agree with you on everything. Nobody can agree with everybody on anything. It's just not a human quality. Not even the Tao or Tao agree with each other on everything. There's various flavors of everything in terms of archetype, but you have a function. So I'm pretty sure you're aware of it, and it sounds like you're doing your function well. So props to that. It's not about being mean for the sake of being mean. It's about keeping things differentiated, defined, and understood. Like people are saying, tourists are cool, but they have to they have to respect the places they visit. When that respect is lost, that's when the issue comes up. When tourists, quote unquote, come into the scene and just say, "This is my scene now, and I want to do whatever I want with it." It's imperialism, ironically enough, a kind of a ontological imperialism. All right, we don't have to keep geeking on that. I really do want to get into the meat and potatoes of the universe. Pio, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or no? Or Raphael, do you have any comments from the way outside? Because I know you're not in on this reality tunnel at all.
I don't have and actually nothing to add to what Danny already said. So
His lawyer concurs. He said, I agree.
I approve what he said.
That's what's up. Raphael, I mean, I don't know. I have any examples that you would relate to, but maybe like Tartaria research, or I don't know. There's people that don't know what's going on. I mean, I'm guilty of this shit. It's like people that don't know what's going on, and
obviously with so many things. Even though here, of course, when we talk about historical research, at least those who take it seriously, they aim for a quest for truth, or something that can be verified. But of course, also here. Well, which is not really achievable, but you do your best.
Yeah.
But of course, I guess in any field of any research or anything that is supposed to be internally consistent, just as you're talking about maybe a supposedly science fiction concept also has to be internally consistent, and many individuals coming up not understanding many of the moving parts and then coming in with their own dogma or their own preferences. Of course, you have this in every field.
It happens. This is how it works. I mean, this is, bifurcation and cultural deviation, subcultures coming out of other cultures. That's why the Protestant Reformation happened, because they were reformed and protested the Catholic Church. So like factionism happens even within 40K. There's literally factions based off of archetype called the Primarchs and their legions, which we'll get into in a little bit. And even the chaos gods themselves aren't the same. Like everything has a facet that's different, but I guess what becomes tricky is when
do you have factions within the fan base too?
I mean, clearly, yeah. I mean, in anything, because this is, the art reflects the culture, life reflects art, reflects life. It's this feedback Ouroboros loop. So there's definitely people who are, and I'm not against this in the sense that I'm going to like hate on them, but it's like, I kind of think it's, okay, a good example in my mind would be like people who are like, I have a Space Marine army and I'm going to paint them in the trans flag colors. And it's like, okay, you can do that. You can be creative, like in a sense, like do whatever thou wilt, but like don't be expecting a bunch of, unless you're getting into the Slanesh territory, don't be expecting a bunch of trans rights on Terra. It's just not going to fit in the lore in the direction it goes. But that's not, see what I mean? It gets complicated because people start projecting their real life personas into a fictional universe that can reflect it well back, but not fully enough to be justified in their minds. It'd be like if this was like live long and prosper became an offensive symbol. And then it's like, Trekkies would be like, oh, live long and prosper. And it's like, how dare you do that? We're going to have to pull that out of every, and, whitewash it and scrape it out of every book and movie or whatever. It would change the whole scene. It would lose itself. And that's kind of what Star Wars had happen more recently. Just the woke. It's good to be woke, but like, stay woke, but at the same time, like be reasonable. Anyway, we don't have to geek out on that too much. So here's where we kind of get into the turf where I've always been so overwhelmed with joy, glee. Like I said, this is a universe that I find so if people like kind of take a sip, they'll understand. It's not so much just about war, although that's the veil through which this is, the ghost under the shroud or whatever is, the shroud is war. But this is like everything from ambition, the story of Horus heresy, which is basically a Luciferian fall, if you want to put it that way. Or Prometheus and with Magnus the Red and going too much into the warp, and which is like see, I don't even know how to approach it because people are whatever. So I think maybe the best place would to be talking about just in general. We can just drive by and obviously Pontius Pio, please do fill in as much as you feel called to do so. Just the three kind of main epochs, because this is when we say 40K, we're talking about the year 40,000, the 41st millennium. Like we're right now in the 2000 whatever 25. It's the 21st millennium or whatever 21st century. So that gives people an understanding. We're talking about some far future reality that comes from ours. We can get to that kind of in the middle point, but there's an entire world and universe that's pre-human. Like humans weren't even on the scene when ancient gods, basically, and the orcs and the Eldar were created. So, and the Necrons and their whole trip. So we don't have to talk like 45 minutes on it. I'm just kind of getting people like around their heads around like there's different, epochs of reality that have influence and grand scale repercussions. Pontius, you want to take the conch? Do you want to talk a little about the war in heaven or anything like that? I mean, I know it's huge, but it's like, how do we even talk about this? Like, once upon a time there was blah blah blah. And we can then talk about maybe the Emperor and 30K, which is like the whole Horus Heresy and the Crusade. And then there's the modern lore, which is like Tyranids and, all that kind of stuff that's happening now. And Primarch's returning, which means nothing to anybody who doesn't know about this, but we'll try to very briefly and succinctly wrap you into a vast. I mean, this makes Star Wars and Harry Potter and stuff look like a speck of sand on a beach. So, and where do you want to start, Pontius?
I mean, it very much depends where we end up falling on, because like if we don't end up like talking about the Necrons, talking of the war in heaven is a bit useless. If we don't end up talking in detail about chaos, same, talking about the war in heaven is a bit useless. If we don't end up talking about the reasons like humanity hates AI and hates aliens and such, it is useless to talk about the dark age of technology. Like it really depends where we want to go argument wise, because explaining everything, I don't think there is the time to do so.
Well, we don't, how to put it, we got like an hour or something, so we don't have to geek out hard, but okay, so people are aware, and jump in and take over the microphone at any point. I don't want to just talk the whole time. I want to hear y'all talk. Basically, imagine a universe where there's very powerful beings and they're at war. Oh my gosh, who'da thunk? And basically they create races as weapons. So that's where you get basically space elves called the Eldar and orcs, which everyone knows what an orc is. And things like the Necrons were their own race that basically swapped their bodies for Terminator machinery to become eternal. It's a long story, but that's what they're doing. So they've been around for millions, billions of years, whatever, before humans even ever existed.
No, like generally to bring it even a bit more into detail, but not too much. Pretty much 60 million years before the events of 40K, a race called the Old Ones, which look like giant toads, but they are very very powerful in what 40K defines as psychic abilities, which are pretty much
frogs, DMT frogs. Keep going.
Yeah, which are pretty much just. Imagine magic powers, but if they had like a level to be measured, the more powerful the Psyker, the more he can alter reality. The Old Ones were all very powerful Psykers, and they were considered master in genetic engineering and such. They are pretty much considered to have been the ones that have brought life to the Milky Way galaxy, because as it is defined even in the books and codexes, they have seeded life in the Milky Way galaxy, and in doing so they created various races, started indirectly creating various races by evolution of Old Ones they created and such, but generally their apotheosis as a race was the Eldar, which are space elves and were pretty much a race all made by very powerful beings, to the point that the Catansi, the Old Ones even made them gods. Like the Eldar materially had gods between them to guide them and follow them and such. One of the other races that was created, and yes, I actually was questioned on this, but with other people we made some research. There is no way to confirm that the Necrontyr race, which then will become the Necron race, was created by anyone but the Old Ones, even if indirectly. There is stuff that hints that they were created by the Old Ones. You just have to do some research on it. And this race was pretty much the most unfortunate case, because they were born on a planet in front of a radioactive star, and they pretty much lived barely over 20 and built their cities underground like tombs, because they knew that they had a very short lifespan and they would die soon. And because of this, all of this suffering, they approached the Old Ones that at that point were still ruling the galaxy and asked them like anything.
Can we get something on screen?
Yeah, a cure, a way to have eternal life, something like that.
Yeah.
The Old Ones ignored them completely. And at that point, the Necrons had to turn to something else. They found a very strange race called the Catans, which wasn't a physical race. It was more of a metaphysical race at that point. And gave them bodies made of a material that only the Necrons know to use and synthesize, called living metal. When these entities got bodies, they started thinking and having personalities of their own, and they revealed to be a race called the Catans, which could be actually pronounced as Satans, which all
You
the
get that whole thing.
Christian lore about Satan and such. But yeah, I call them the Catans. But yeah, generally they were godlike beings with powers similar to the old ones. What they did was pretty much they made a deal with the Necrontyr, and they pretty much promised them, yes, you will get eternal life if you help us in a war against the old ones, because we really don't like them. And the Supreme King of the Necrontyr accepted this deal. The Catan actually constructed robotical bodies made of living metal, which is the material the Necrons now synthesize and are made of, and made a soul transference from the main bodies of the Necrontyr to the new metal bodies. But while they did it, they also devoured the majority of the souls of the Necrontyr race, pretty much leaving almost the entire race as mindless automatons without any kind of personality and such. Only their upper echelons retain individuality and personalities, like Silent King, Zarek the Stormlord and such. Generally, it is just like only the upper echelons of nobility and people really that were too powerful to be stripped of their own soul. What happened after that was the war between the Catans and the Old Ones, the Necrons going against them too, and the Eldar trying to fight. But the problem is that living metal is completely immune to psychic powers, meaning that pretty much the main ability to fight of the Eldar and the Old Ones was completely useless because they were fighting soulless robots. And what happened was pretty much the Old Ones has created a new race called the Krorks, which later will de-evolve into the Orcs, and use them pretty much as a weapon race because they were built only for war. And yeah,
imagine pit bulls.
Yeah,
like we breed pit bulls. Like these guys bred a race to like do their fighting for them, kind of thing.
Yeah, and pretty much they forgot to actually install an off switch, unfortunately, so that is causing problems even now. But what ended up happening is the war ended. The Old Ones were slaughtered by the Necrons and the Catans. The Catans turned against one another, while the Eldars went into hiding inside the webway, which is the way they use faster than light travel. It is pretty much a corridor between dimensions. The Krorks were left isolated, and because they do not have their own technology, they only know how to adapt other technology. They became pretty much stranded, because if nobody was fighting them, they had no way of adapting technology. And in the end, the Necrons, realizing the betrayal of the Catans, went to war against their own gods and won. They defeated the Catans, killed the Landugor, which was the name of the Flayer that created the Flayer virus, imprisoned all others pretty much to be used as weapons or batteries. And after millions of years of war, they went into their tombs and went to sleep, while the Krorks were still running amok in the galaxy, and while the Eldars were living in the webway, now left alone from the creators, which were the Old Ones.
Right.
Fast forward to recent times, the Krorks de-evolve in the Orcs. The Eldar become the dominant species of the galaxy because they are immortal. If they die, they can actually come back from the dimension of souls, also known as the warp. And the fact they are all psychers makes them problematic, because they started pretty much to corrupt the fabric of reality by sheer numbers, not even using their own abilities. And all of this went forward up until the human race emerged from Earth, which happened around the year 5000. And after that, it pretty much entered into an age known as the Dark Age of Technology, which will be an age of advancement of humanity like no other ever seen. Like humans will pretty much become the dominant species of the galaxy, not even by numbers, because there were still a lot more Eldars, but by sheer technology. Like we could not be touched. Like technology was so advanced, it will be magic for us.
Kind of like what we're entering now. I mean, imagine ChatGPT and all this shit like 1,000 years.
Yeah, and what ended up happening is that humanity grew complacent, started assigning all of its materials and such, all its discoveries.
Hold on. Before we get into Dark Knight, all this stuff, the technology, because we just did a whole drive-by. Hopefully everybody picked it up. There's a lot going on. There's two things I realized that we could say briefly, just so they're up to snuff, and then we can maybe talk about modern 40K in terms of like the Emperor, the Chaos Gods, and all that stuff. So one of the presuppositions in this universe is that there's like material reality, like a materially reductionistic, like here's my computer and I can touch it kind of place, and then there's a parallel reality, kind of like what quantum mechanics is understanding now, and spiritualists, have always thought, or whatever, called the warp or the Imperium, or the Empyrean. I mean, do you want to talk about that a little? It's basically a psychic parallel that's feeding off of. It's like if everything's a yin yang, there's a material, and then there's like a psychic or mental.
The problem is that defining it as a yin yang or feeding off reality is really the wrong way of putting it.
Illumine me.
Yeah, the warp is actually a dimension born not only from souls, like it is explained, but it is also born from the simple fact that sentient species with emotions exist. Pretty much the warp is the epitome of if enough people believe it, it will happen. But if it is applied, but if it is applied not only to general ideas like it happens in 40K, like a crusade, wanting to kill someone and such, but to the sheer emotions that a person can feel. Like it is pretty much in existence because nature exists. It is a counterpart to pretty much what happens in reality. And by itself is not even subjected to the same laws of reality. In fact, technically, no time and space exist inside the warp. The fact you can enter it doesn't mean there is space in there. Like
it's almost like dream time.
Yeah, it is a dream dimension, and in fact, many people don't know actually what Geller fields do, but Geller fields in ships pretty much project a bubble of reality around the ship so that it can move through the warp while not being touched by its baleful energies. Now, the warp technically could be a good thing. The problem is that dark emotions are a lot more common than good ones. So this means that over time, over countless wars, races that have existed, slaughters, bloodshed and such, the warp slowly became more and more corrupt.
Right.
To the point that 3 chaos gods, which are known even in 40K now, existed by the point humanity was born. Like those three were obviously Tzeentch, the changer of way, god of intrigue and plans, pretty much just betrayal. Then you have then you have Nargol, the god of decay, because if something dies, it decays. It is also considered the god of life because it is part of the cycle of life. Something dies and something is born from it. In fact, it is the main reason it is considered the minor one of the real evil gods, because technically it has no evil tendencies. It's just an entity of nature.
Right, and like a function, a benign function. Whereas Tzeentch is more like, I'm plotting to kill you, so that mischievous slyness, kind of that it's thought of as more like not magical, but like just kind of like selfish manipulation, if you want to put it that way. Khorne, which we talked about a minute ago, is straight up like, I want to kill you. Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne.
Yeah, Khorne is the god of battle and honor and war and blood, because everyone is pretty much shedding blood when they are on a battlefield. But generally they also have good sides, because Nargol represents a cycle of life and death and rebirth.
Like mushrooms growing from a fallen tree. It's like it happens.
Khorne represents strength and honor, because he is actually very honorable, to the point that he despises psychers. His main way of fighting is melee, because it is the most honorable way of fighting. Correct. And then you have even Tzeentch, that is also the god of change. So if things don't stay constant, it is Tzeentch, because he's actually bringing change. And then you have the fourth one that was born a bit later. This dimension, as I said, is not malignant per se, but the kind of situation that was developing in the galaxy back from the War in Heaven made it malignant only for the kind of emotions and actions that were being undertaken, because every emotion and action actually has consequences inside the warp.
It has ripples.
And one of the main things that can be seen is in the demon Draknien. Draknien was a demon born from the first homicide ever committed by a human, which is actually connected to Cain and Abel. And it was a very powerful one, because it was a very powerful action. In fact, to the point that even the Emperor could have been killed during the war in the webway by it. So much it was powerful. And it pretty much moves like this.
So
now,
I just wanted to kind of get people on the board. So there's on the one hand, like, material evolution, if you want to put it that way, and all this crazy stuff in the scene universe. But then there's forces, i.e., chaos gods. There's many names for these things. The dark forces and all this stuff that are influencing reality for the great game. It's almost like, it gets meta really quickly, where it's like, we want this game to go on, so we're going to add elements of our different archetypes, whether it's bloodthirstiness in Khorne and just like wanting to crush skulls, or super high wizardry, magic mystery tour stuff with Tzeentch, or straight up just like a lethargic kind of it reminds me a little of the comic book guy, or from The Simpsons, Nurgle, where it's just like, just dirty and corrosive at worst. Anyway, there's so many levels to this, and driving by like this makes it seem overwhelming. And I would say that 40K is probably one of the most overwhelming things. There's a lot of good videos out there, but just to show you guys, there's a lot of mechanics behind the curtain that sustain the logic of the world, even though it's like highfalutin, sci-fi fantasy kind of stuff. It's cogent. Let's put it that way. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want like people to kind of understand that much. We didn't mention She Who Thirsts, Slanesh, but do you want to quickly say what was going on there?
Slanesh was actually born during a period of humanity called the Long Night, that actually comes after the events I explained of the Dark Age of Technology and the fall of humanity after AI turned on us, and a multi-centuries war was started against humans by their own creations, which brought them on their knees. Eldars became once again the dominant species of the galaxy. They started causing problems because there were so many of them, and they were all powerful psychers, to the point that something the Imperium calls warp storms were happening inside the warp and even in reality, which pretty much means the warp is like, there is a reason the warp exists. The warp is the main way humanity has to travel at faster than light travel. It is pretty much what happens is the ships that are equipped with something called a warp drive. This warp drive pretty much tears apart reality, opens a door to the warp. They enter the warp while projecting a bubble of reality around the ship called Gellerfields.
Using a navigator, which is like
using a navigator, which is somebody that is genetically modified to be able to navigate the warp. In fact, they are psychers. They have a third eye on their forehead that they open only in the warp, because only they can actually stare in the warp.
Okay, yeah. I should say just really quickly, everybody technically has evolved at some level to have like psyker in them. It's like everybody has a little magic Harry Potter, but not everybody's a wizard. And the more psyker, like psychically in tune you are, the more you can basically fiddle with telekinesis, or mind manipulation, or summoning demons, or whatever the fuck, the stuff in the warp. Anyway,
it can actually become dangerous though, because psychers, if they are untrained and unsanctioned, actually are very, very prone of being possessed by demons of the warp. So because the power of the warp comes from the warp, so. And and pretty much what they will do will be traveling a couple of months inside of the warp. Will mean outside you were traveling maybe for the same period, maybe for less, maybe for thousands of years. It all depends on how things go. But at the same time, in those few months you lived in the warp, you could traverse the galaxy from one side to the other, depending on the current you take, the passages you take, and such. And what would happen with that is that the warp storms that the Eldars by sheer numbers were causing made warp travel completely impossible. So humanity was stuck in their own territory and were unable to even help each other if needed by jumping in the warp and sending reinforcements or supplies or technology to whoever needed them. So they pretty much the Eldars just by existing, they brought down the human race after it was already on his knees because of the cybernetic revolt.
And that's called the Old Night. So there's a period, like he was saying, basically humans get to this apex of technology. It's Star Trek world times 40, right? So like they're going out, checking out things, and then all of a sudden this tsunami of psychic energy and kind of despair is a specific word, but it's like heavy darkness, Old Night kind of blankets. It's like the Dark Ages. Like they went into feral kind of mode, and planets that were connected got cut off. So people are evolving separately. I mean, everybody was in this empire, and then all of a sudden this planet can't talk to this planet for 10,000 years or whatever it is. So people start doing their own little subcultures, and Terra, which is Earth, maintains its thing. I mean, we can get into the whole emperor here, I guess. But long story short, the old knight is crazy. It's like this really bad situation where all of humanity had spread out into the stars and was doing this kind of awesome, ad astra to the stars kind of thing. And then all of a sudden the brakes get pumped, shit hits the fan, we can't communicate. What happens, if it would be like kind of like if everybody lost electricity in the modern world, and then like what happens to the towns, in Japan versus Italy versus North America, like we wouldn't be talking anymore. Very little, if at all. So anyway, I mean, we're covering a lot. You're doing a good job. I know this is so much for a lot, and we haven't even gotten to like the beef of the Primarchs and stuff. So the Emperor, which is kind of where the modern thing is, he's basically supposed to be this. I mean, there's theories on this, right? He's like shamans killed themselves to create a psyker entity, or he is this kind of supernatural being.
I mean, that technically is a theory, but before that, we were on Slanesh just to.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. You're right. You're right. Long story short, Slanesh,
yeah,
the Elder are fucking and killing so much that they created space demon god.
Pretty much what happened was after humanity fell, the Eldars that were, as I said, a post-scarcity society. They didn't have to build anything. They didn't have to hunt. They didn't have to mine. They pretty much could sing into existence whatever they needed because, as I said, they were very, very heavily attuned to the warp. And I actually had more insights into this by reading the second book of the trilogy I cover in the next video, which will premiere tomorrow. Because in the second book, you actually get a vision from an Eldar that was alive during the apex of the Eldar Empire, and you see from his eyes the birth of Slanesh. You see the before, during, and after. So, and
I mean, just so people are aware, imagine like the people, like, I don't know, Rome. I mean, you're Italian. Imagine Romans. At some point, they got like comfortable culturally, so they were like, "We're bored. Let's watch people be crucified and eat each other in lions' dens and gladiatorial events and stuff." Now, imagine that like for a long time, just keep going and going and going. So the Eldar are just getting more and more depraved, more and more crazy, stirring up these subconscious emotions in the warp, basically creating all this tumult, right, and all this bad juju, and they're just basically bored. I mean, what happens, like, we joke around, but like things like Epstein Island and stuff like that happen when elites are bored and they have like some proclivities that aren't that great, and they're like, I want to just do what I want, and they do, and they, that's how that kind of stuff happens in our real world. So imagine the Eldar, who are like basically eternal beings, psychic beings who are super powerful, own the universe essentially, and they're bored. And they're just like, all right, well, orgies are cool, but what happens if we're all on fire while we're fucking, or whatever it is, right? So it just escalates and escalates, and then that's how Slanesh is born, like all this psychic feedback.
Yeah, at one point, the planetary level slaughters and the amount of depravity that pretty much was happening around the around the galaxy from the side of the Eldars ended up birthing a chaos god that pretty much was born into reality, but then moved to the warp. Pretty much the amount of negative energies, actions, and such that the Eldars alone had managed to create into the warp coalesced into Satan itself, which was and is Slanesh, which is the god of excess in all of his forms and the god of pleasure also. And
like hedonism, basically.
Yeah. What would happen was pretty much when he was born, the majority of the Eldars died because Slanesh ended up devouring their souls. Now their own psychic powers are dangerous for themselves because Slanesh is always hunting them. The remains of the Eldar Empire actually broke down into various factions that are openly hostile with each other in various cases. And other than that, now the Eldars are a dying species that cannot really decently reproduce. And when they die, unless they use very specific methods like soul stones and infinity circuits, when they die and their souls enter the warp, they are instantly devoured by Slanesh. So there is no reincarnation like there was before for them. This actually managed to free up the galaxy from all the psychic energies that was causing the warp storms. And at that point, with the end of the long night, because this was the event that ended it, the Emperor of Mankind would emerge on Earth. That at that point was pretty much imagine Mad Max, but on a planetary level, ruled by techno-barbarian warlords using technologies from the Dark Ages. And like people imagine, when I say Mad Max, and imagine like these scrap people killing each other, but I had the Dark Ages of technology because some of the technologies they actually use to fight each other are so dangerous that 40k actually prohibits them. Like to the point that the Emperor used them during the wars that will follow until Terra was unified under his rule. But after that, they would all go and be sealed under the Imperial Palace and never be brought out again because they're too powerful.
Right.
And like generally, it is the emperor was like, there is various stories about the origins of the emperor. We will cover it in a future video, so I don't spoil anything for now. But generally, the emperor is a very powerful human being. In fact, arguably, is barely human at all, and is a psyker of such a tremendous power that, just to make an example, he can teleport, he can stop time while moving through it, create a bubble where the time is stopped, control the planetary population of entire planetary systems with his own mind, and to the point that his own singular presence emits a light inside the warp. He's so powerful that he's like a beacon inside the realm of souls. In fact, it is the only reason that in 40k, navigators can still navigate the warp, because they are following the light of the Emperor, the beacon. They are orienting themselves by following the light the Emperor emits in the warp by sheer life. And the Emperor will pretty much create genetically modified super warriors called the Thunder Warriors, and he will start a war that will be called what that will be known as the Unification War, and will unify Terra under his rule. After that, he will create 20 genetically modified sons that were pretty much almost demigods compared even to him, and these creations would go on to actually lead directly to the Astartes or the Space Marines, which are, like in this case, as Raphael mentioned, the breed of warriors that you're playing in Space Marine, especially in Space Marine 1, because in 2 you're playing the new breed, which is the Primaris, which are very shitty lore. But because of the machinations of chaos that by that point was trying even to mine the efforts of the Emperor, the 20 baby Primarchs will be scattered around the galaxy at random. A war portal opened in their own incubation pods. If we follow the new lore, it was because of Erda, the mother of the Primarchs.
I was going to say, I thought I read something at the end of the death or something. Keep going.
Yeah. And pretty much what will happen will be the Emperor will create the 20 legions of Space Marines and launch the legendary Great Crusade into the galaxy. That was pretty much a giant intergalactic level war to reconquer the galaxy in the name of the humans. And in the meantime, find the Primarchs along the way and reunite them with their own genetical sons in the Astartes.
Right. So it's a little like the Roman Empire expanding and kind of trying to figure out who's on board back in our own personal history. He's going out to the space and not only trying to find his lost genetic sons, quote unquote, these Primarchs, which we can get into now, because each of the Primarchs has like an archetype and kind of a proclivity, and they're all very different. And 2 of them are, quote, missing. And I started watching your Ring Duran movie or whatever that's called, because the missing Primarchs are fascinating, just in terms of lore. They kind of allude, it's like there's a lot, not everything is watertight in 40k. They leave some mystery, right? So it's like even Malcador the Sigilite's like, we don't talk about them, we've erased them from history, kind of thing. And but they, they were part of it or whatever. So you did a very good job. I know some of your fans are like, what the fuck, stop interrupting him. I'm like, not everybody I have on this podcast even knows what we're talking about, so I'm just trying to make sure that we're chewing our food before we swallow it. Some of y'all are hardcore nerds, and myself included, so I get it. But this is just kind of, it's hard to bridge the worlds of like noob and geek, like hardcore fan. So we got up to basically 30k. You just have to think of the Emperor as almost like Alexander the Great on steroids meets Napoleon meets like Luke Skywalker or something, where it's just like he's got all the mojo, he's got a vision, he's super psychic. It's his will, very Nietzschean in a sense. He's like, I will do what I want and basically create order out of chaos, kind of like a Freemason in a sense, in a weird way. It's like, look, this universe is crazy, it's gone to shit, there's chaos gods, there's Xenos, there's all sorts of bad things that are making humanity hard to even incubate and thrive. Let's go deal with that shit and create our boundary zone and save our asses, basically. So he comes on the scene. I mean, theoretically, he was evolving with humanity for like thousands of years. Like he was there in the history. Like he's kind of an eternal dude, or timeless in a sense. He might be human, but
technically was born 7,000 years before year 0. So by the time of 30k, when the when Long Night ended, he was around 40,000 years old. So yeah,
super old soul. And he had buddies like Malcador the Sigilite, and I forget his name, but the guy later on, one of the
John Grammaticus.
There you go. Thank you. I'm like, I just read this shit, I should know it. I love that stuff, by the way, but some people are like, this is terrible for the the logic, I hate this. I think it adds just elements of cool. But all right, so we're at a point we've talked about a lot. I think maybe now would make the most sense of like just who are the legions and the Primarchs, because you have to understand this is all the lore is being built for. I mean, everybody who's listening to this kind of gets this, but some might not. It's being built for a game, a board game. So imagine like Monopoly, you have these pieces and it's like, oh, here's the story of the guy with the monocle. He was actually a tycoon and he had 4 sons and they were called this, that, and the other, and they had these wives. Like it just goes deep down rabbit holes that way. It's stemming from basically 5D chess, if you want to put that way, like a tabletop game. So when the Primarchs are made, which are kind of, I guess, genetic kind of attributes ripped from himself, i.e. the God Emperor, Emperor, each one is a little different, right? So do you want to just kind of do your hot takes? And Pio, feel free to talk here because we've been talking a lot. I know, Raphael. So like there's 20 of them, 2 of which are unknown, and we can theorize on those, but they're like the lost Primarchs in their legions. We don't know shit about their attributes or character qualities or physical attributes or anything like that. But let's just go ahead and maybe rip through the I'll just say it. Like the first legion is the Dark Angels. So I mean the hot take would be like these are like your British knights in shining armor, swordsmen kind of thing.
Seeing what they became in 40K, that would be very ironic.
Yeah, I know. I mean, see, there's so much to it where it's like, oh, there's a lot of not paradox, but it's more to it than meets the eye. But like there's like red is red, and then it's like all these hues can come from it. So anyway, so the first legion, right? And Pio, obviously, Pontius, tell me whatever you want about that. Lionel Johnson, and even some of the names are kind of funny. You get into the stuff like Angron, Angry. It's like, okay, like there's only so much IP you can do. So these are people.
I will say the most ironic one is actually Ferrus Manus, because
right.
Ferrus Manus is Latin for iron hands. His main character trait is that he has iron hands, and his own legion is called the Iron Hands. So
it's literal. It's literal.
And his hands are of iron. So
yeah.
All right. So yeah, basically, I mean, we'll just go.
Have you seen my iron hands yet?
I think Ferrus. I mean, I hope they backfill some lore. I mean, I've seen your memes and stuff like, oh, the lore for the Iron Hand sucks and stuff. They're interesting enough. Every one of these things has an interesting aspect. So if you're like, we'll get into it in a second. So basically, if you kind of like, I don't know, honor, chivalry, sword fighting, and think like, Middle Ages England, Lionel Johnson and the First Legion are your dudes, right? And they're cool like that. They've got a whole lot of lore. We don't have to get into that because we only have so much time. But basically, everything from like inter brother factioning and just betrayal. I'm stuttering. Sorry, betrayal and their whole thing is like we are the sword. They were the first. They were like the first legion to be made. There's 20 legions. Anyway, so they're this first legion where it's like we're the sword and strength, kind of like go out and conquer boys. And so they're all about that shit.
Yeah, they're also the one that actually exterminated the Thunder Warriors at the end of the Unification Wars.
Right. So just to that point, like basically imagine a guy who's like, all right, I created gladiators and they're cool, but now I've got gladiators 2.0. So I need to flush the toilet on those first gladiators. You guys go kill them. So it's a brutal universe. There's only war, right? So the second legion, unknown Primarch, and unknown any attribute is one of those mysteries. Third legion, Fulgrim. He's imagine this like pretty boy, and obviously I'm just kind of meme drive-bying, but feel free to say anything you want. Fulgrim is like this perfectionist, which has his double-edged sword, right? Where it's like, oh my gosh, everything's got to be so beautiful and stuff. But basically, when he falls to chaos, spoiler, he's about refining and finding the highest pleasure in hedonism. So he's going to Slaanesh, like we talked, and his dudes are the Emperor's children. I'm actually finishing up the Fabius Bile trilogy right now. I got like 20 pages left. Really good stuff. If you're an Emperor's Children fan, they're releasing that out right now in the actual tabletop. Like they're kind of bolstering their codex and their armies and stuff. They're coming out with new iterations. So if you're into like excessive, and when we say excessive, the cacophony and like just imagine people who like it's like Hellraiser. It's like the whole thing about Hellraiser is like we love pain so much it feels so good. It's like these dudes kind of like they're like ripping their faces off for fun and like screaming till their vocal cords are shattered into a million pieces or whatever. So that's Fulgrim. I mean, he's like this beautiful kind of Prince Charming pretty boy poster child, almost like Fabio or something like that, right?
Yeah, but Fulgrim was more created as a figurehead for a politician than a fighter. The fact he was a Primarch and a very good swordsman, still made him a force to be reckoned with, especially like during the Horus Heresy. But generally, Fulgrim was mainly a politician than a fighter. If he could take the way of politics instead of slaughtering people, he would do it, at least at the time after the heresy. He would always take the way to slaughter people. But you can even see that by the fact that technically, this is actually an unknown element. The Emperor's Children were actually the only legion during the Great Crusade and such, and the only people that were allowed to use the double-headed Aquila that was the symbol of the Emperor on their armor.
Right. Which some people, and just, I mean, whatever, if you're into this, you don't get this problem, but some people, like, they see that symbol and think, oh, this is Nazism or whatever. It's like Rome used this eagle. Like, it's a very ancient kind of symbol. But the Aquila, which means eagle in Latin, Aquila, is the double-headed eagle, like you're saying, the Emperor's children, the children of the Emperor. That's the whole point. It's like, look, we're in their image. And to your point, they're basically like super poetic, like they're artists. They're very fine cultural, like, attaches. So they might be able to swashbuckle, but basically they'd rather sip tea and talk about how beautiful Shakespeare is or something like that. So, but they fall to chaos. Some of these guys fall. I mean, we'll get into the Horus Heresy in a second, but or maybe not at all. I don't know. It depends on time. But so anyway, Perturabo, 4th Legion, the Iron Warriors.
Perturabo actually is a very controversial figure to approach. Imagine if a super genius tactician, very adept with technology, had ADHD and problems controlling his own rage.
And an inferiority complex or superiority complex.
No, more of an inferiority complex, but I think it more stems from the fact that Perturabo was probably one of the most capable Primarchs when it came to moving war. In fact, he was the one that actually fought in open battle the Herds race. That was a race of aliens that was known for using time as a weapon, like to the point that even their own being, like their own bodies, accelerated time around themselves. Like even if there was a herd migration on a planet, you will see the planet age as long as there were herds alive on it. It was a big problem. And Perturabo and the Iron Warriors pretty much took them head on under order of the Emperor, lost half of the Legion, lost a good bunch of their fleet, but in the end they actually defeated them. They killed them all, or at least almost all of them, because they still exist, but now they are a lot less of a threat. And Perturabo was the only, like, imagine the Diamond Spear of the Great Crusade given to a single person, because he's the best at what he does, but at the same time, because he's the best at what he does, the others don't like the way he does it. Like, he was always looked down by his brothers because of his very barbaric methods of sending his own Astartes to die if it meant getting an advantage in combat, of not caring about civilian casualties if there was a bigger enemy to fight, of not caring about pretty much anything but the wars he was fighting and the enemies.
Very pragmatic like that.
Yeah, and it is pretty much why I hate the way his arc went in the Horus Heresy. Because the way I see it, because Perturabo actually fell to chaos because he was fed up with the Emperor launching him and his Legion in the worst fucking battlefields possible, and then not even have the decency to say thank you when he comes around with half the Legion he had before, and with even himself with scars and wounds that will leave signs on his own body, even in true Terminator armor. Because like even during the Herds War, his own flagship got hit, and he like was launched all the way through the through the command decks against a wall, so that he got pretty much into the fighting. And what would happen will be that he actually fell to chaos and joined Horus in the Heresy, because he was fed up with the Emperor not appreciating him in any way and his brothers looking down on him. But in the end, he found that Horus during the Heresy was exactly the same as the Emperor in that regard. In fact, I hate the fact that Perturabo ended up falling to chaos. In my opinion, he was, by that point, pure renegade. It would be like, fuck the Imperium, fuck chaos. Fuck both of you. Like, if you show up, I will kill both of you.
Yeah, I'm going to do my own thing. I mean, he was kind of a bitter soul who was like, you guys don't see my genius. I want to prove to my dad that I am a genius, but no one's giving me the time of day. And like you said, they use me for my strength and to be a cleanup crew and like, to bombard and do the whole, I forget what kind of warfare it's called now. Siege warfare. That's like his whole shtick. Yeah. So they're like, hey, we need to break open this can. You're the can opener, but we never say thank you. And he's like, fuck, I'm sick of this shit. And basically he snaps and he's like, fuck this, we're out of here. I mean, it's actually really well written stuff in a lot of the Horus Heresy books. And I should say, there's 30,000 plus pages in these Heresy books. It took me 2 years to read, but it's one of the best things you can do if you've got the time to do it. Some of the books suck, but whatever. They're all mostly good. All right, we're going to keep ripping through them because there's a few. So I say Jagati Khan, but it could be Jagatai. I've heard.
I have a question for the Perturabo stuff.
Yeah.
Then, is it true that he built the toys in his free time?
Yeah, he actually built toys. Well, they were more like miniaturized recreations of working weaponry of 40k. Like even the War on Titan, he would end up smashing in the face of Fulgrim, was technically accurate to the most minuscule detail. Like it was literally a mini Titan. It could work if he wanted to, but it was just a toy. But yeah, it was his way. Like he even played a lot of Regicide, which is pretty much the 40k version of chess. And even then, he played a lot of war games on his own flagship with his own warsmiths and his own commanders, pretty much to try and train his own tactical mind against others through pretty much playing 40k into 40k. So.
But he's, as the name would imply, perturbed. He's angry. He's frustrated. He's perturbed. So he's always got this chip on his shoulder, basically being like, I mean, imagine like, you know, a 40k model maker being like, I've made the perfect miniature. I painted it perfectly. And everyone's like, you loser. We don't even want to talk to you. He's like, God damn it. So, yeah, he kind of loses his shit. I know that he, it kind of talks about some of his toys is a strong word, but some of his creations, like he's kind of like a Renaissance man, and he's doing his own thing, creating even like prisons people can't get out of, his brothers and stuff like that. So interesting dude. Anyway, let's keep going because I want to touch on them all, but there's obviously a few. So Jagati Khan, with the white scars, think Genghis Khan, and you know,
he's actually inspired by the son of Genghis Khan. It is not official. Like I think he was also called Jagatai, and yeah, they are pretty much the Mongols, the Mongolian faction of 40k, and they actually specialize in guerrilla warfare and speed attacks.
Yeah, imagine like Hell's Angels meets Genghis Khan Mongols. That's kind of what's going on. They're like
and make them superhuman because they're actually space marines. So
they've got great honor. They're really in touch with the warp. Some of these people are naturally, like we'll get to the Thousand Suns in a minute, but basically they're into the warp. They do magic and use psychers and stuff in their culture, but they have a respect for the boundaries of it more. So they're not like, let's see how far we can take this. They're like, there's limits here, and we don't play with fire too much, but we know how to make a fire, kind of thing. Some of the, you know, I like I said, I don't play the tabletop, but they've got really, all these guys are interesting, and all their stories are so interesting. They have books upon books about this stuff. So if you're into any of these archetypes or ideas, you can explore them very thoroughly. Any other thoughts on the White Scars? I mean, they scar themselves like ritualistically, like that's kind of part of their name, I think.
Like generally, they are very honor-bound warriors. So there were very big, like generally there were very big bonds of brotherhood between themselves. And like their method of warfare might have not been the most honorable one generally when it came to the battles of the Imperium of Men, but their way of fighting actually minimized casualties because as I said, it was guerrilla warfare. It was touch and flee attacks that would actually target key points in the enemy's supply lines or armor, or target officers and such. They will pretty much become a thorn in the side of the heretics during the Horus Heresy, or a thorn in the side of every enemy that was fighting them. But even then, don't take them for weak. Like even when we go for Jagatai Khan himself, he himself knew that he was a better swordsman than even Fulgrim, and he pretty much confirmed that he could beat Fulgrim if he wanted. He admitted it to Fulgrim himself, because he said, everything about you make known. You know nothing about me or how I fight. So yes, you will lose against me. And he would actually even defeat Demon Primarch Mortarion during the Horus Heresy, even if it was a pretty tight fight until
he got his ass kicked, but he still lived. I mean, he shouldn't have even been alive. And it's interesting that you're bringing that up. Like, it's not exactly yin versus yang, but all these kind of archetypes triangulate. So it's like Fulgrim of the Third is a swordsman. This guy's a swordsman, Jagatai Khan. So it's like, who's the better swordsman? And they have like beef that way. Rogel Dorn likes strategy and siege warfare. So does Perturabo, blah, blah. So there's all these kind of like fractalizing archetypal. I mean, that's where the drama comes from, where it's like, there can only be one kind of thing, but everybody has like, you know, red is not blue, is not green, but like the rainbow, when you look at it back and full, is amazing. All right, well, let's keep going. So the sixth one is basically it's Leman Russ. Think Space Vikings. These guys are barbaric. The Space Wolves are their guys. Space Wolves, they straight up are like Nordic Vikings. Like they've got like, you know, little paraphernalia of bones and animal skins and shit like that. They're coming from a planet that's like basically Norway.
Space Siberia.
Yeah, Siberia. There you go. It's like it's gnarly. It's like brutal as fuck. So they're pretty hardcore. And they also, much with the White Scars, they have psychers. I forget what they call them now off of the top of my head. But
Rune priests.
Rune priests, exactly. They're fucking with the magic. And this comes into a story arc later where basically like it gets known. We don't have to talk about it now, but basically the Council of Nicaea is like, don't fuck with magic like this. And then some people are genetically predisposed to it. So they're like, do I turn off my skills? Like I'm a magician. I have psychic abilities. What do you mean I can't fuck with this? So anyway, Leman Russ is like the guillotine, essentially. He's like the fucking assassin. I mean, how would you describe Leman Russ? He's like
the hound of the
pit bull. Yeah. It's like,
but generally, like there is this misconception that because they're space Vikings, like they don't have a culture of their own or are even barbaric. But no, the Space Wolves are actually extremely bound to honor. Like even if we don't take the books of the Macarian Crusade trilogy that I talk about in the next video of tomorrow, even during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, it was actually the Space Wolves that ended up defending Tarashauten, the adoptive mother of the adoptive mother of Primarch Robute Gilliman, against Conrad Kurz, because they knew that they could not stop him because he was a Primarch, but at least they could delay him enough and she could find a place to hide or a way to escape. And pretty much they went, we are here for a fight. Let's take Kurz head on. And
they need the muscle. They need the bloodthirsty muscle. So imagine just like a guy in Berserker mode, like Thor the Viking in Berserker mode with a bunch of psychic fucking Vikings with him. They're very cool. I mean, this is very dry, quick caricatures, but I just wanted to kind of do a hot take for people who do not even know what a faction is or a legion is. So that's the Space Wolves. The 7th is Rogel Dorn and the Imperial Fists. I mean, he's just this hyper.
Rogel Dorn.
Yeah, I love all the Primarchs. And his trip in the desert where he almost falls to chaos, pretty interesting stuff. But basically, Rogel Dorn is like this staunch, pragmatic wall of security against the forces of, you know, chaos and disorder, basically. I don't think
it's pretty much like quite the opposite to Perturabo, right? Because while Perturabo can't control his emotions and at the same time he's an expert in siege warfare and in breaking defenses and pretty much destroying fortresses of planets, Rogel Dorn instead is the opposite. It is why he's called the Wall. He doesn't show any emotion at all. He's always stoic, always serious, to the point that you will like to the point that there were people that considered him like a statue when he was in contemplation, because he was not moving at all while keeping the same expression for hours on end. And him and his Space Marines were actually specialized in building fortresses, defenses, and pretty much defending the Imperium of Men. It is why he was also named the Praetorian of Terra, and it is why he was also, shortly before the Horus Heresy, actually charged with building the defenses of the Imperial Palace.
Right. So basically,
that angered Perturabo immensely. So
Perturabo and he are both like genius engineers, and this guy is like a stoic good boy, and Perturabo is like a petulant ass who's just like, I want to make bongs and fuck all y'all, or whatever. But yeah, what you're saying, because we might not even get to it, but the Horus Heresy is this like huge split between these Primarchs. There's a civil war. They pick sides. Some go to chaos, some don't. And this guy is basically the last bastion, basically the security guard of the Emperor and Earth, Terra. They call Terra Earth in this series. So, all right. I mean, that's.
And the funniest thing about the Imperial Feasts are the fact are when other actual interact with them, because they always talks about logistics and nothing else, and it's really funny when they vote.
You're lagging pretty heavily, Pio, anyway, so fix a bit your connection. No, but
sorry, I'm.
He's behind Dorn's wall.
No. Like generally, yeah, they were considered the defenders of the Imperium of Men and such, and were actually one of the few legions that was present during the Siege of Terra, which was the closing part of the Horus Heresy, when the traitor legions reached Terra and pretty much besieged the Emperor's Imperial Palace.
Yeah, he beefed it up and made it like impenetrable. I mean, it still got him. Alfarius and them got in or whatever, but shit was pretty airtight. And it's funny, I had never thought about this. I'm Scotch Irish Cherokee or whatever, and that sigil or whatever of their of the Imperial fist is like a fist, and my family Scottish crest is a hand that looks like that with a sword that says "This I'll defend." And I'd never ever thought of this before, but it's like, oh my god, Rogel Doran, this he'll defend to the hilt. He's the last wall between the enemy and the gates kind of thing. All right, so Conrad Kurz, I read the Night Lords trilogy recently. I mean, they're one of these things where it's like super cringe. He's a psycho who can basically see the future, but he's nihilistic about it, basically.
Yeah, but like seeing the future is not something he really chose to do. It is an ability he has, but that he cannot control. It is why when he saw the Emperor, he pretty much saw the Horus Heresy happening, everything else that happened. And for the planet he ended up on, which was Nostromo, he ended up pretty much becoming, what if Batman liked to flay people alive? And he actually did that because he actually is a weapon of terror. It is what the Emperor even defined him as, because the mere mention that the Space Marines of the Night Lords, as they will become called, or Conrad Kurz himself, were coming to like put a planet into compliance, or even bring a new planet that was discovered into the Imperium of Men, will sometimes even push the people that were defending it to just surrender, like, even before they arrived, because the simple fact that they could arrive, you could not even see them, and by the time you notice they are there, they had already started slashing you to pieces while you were still alive. Or even there were times like where they started throwing, if I remember right, it was corpses of children from Thunder or gunships onto the planet and the defenders below, because the defenders were like, we won, the Night Lords are retreating, and the Night Lords passed overhead and started throwing corpses of mutilated children down.
Because it's a demoralization technique. I mean, it's a terrorist technique in a sense. They're the terrorist wing, like, of the Emperor's kids. So it's like, I've got to have one kid who will, like, basically scare the shit out of you into submitting. This is that element.
Yeah, and pretty much what it was, he was a weapon of terror, to the point that even just the mention that he could be around if something happened brought many people to just surrender or just stay into compliance, because, I prefer lowering my head than having to deal with them. So.
Right. But I mean, his character is very complicated. He's got some interesting dynamics with Vulcan and Sanguinius and stuff. But the idea is basically imagine a guy who's super, like, I don't even know. Anarchist is a weird way to put it, but he's like he's like a petulant kid who could see the future, and he's like, I know how it'll go, so I know I won't die. So he's kind of reckless, but he's also he doesn't have much love for his own dudes, and they're more like the Night Lords themselves are the darker kind of backstabbing, kind of egotistical, sly. I mean, in a weird way, almost like mafia. Kind of, but not really. Do you see what I mean?
Well, generally, it stems from a difference even in the recruiting ways of the Legion, because the other Legions actually tried to keep things in recruiting, like if we remove Angron and some of the other Primarchs like Perturabo, because Perturabo was like scorched earth to the point that a rebellion on his planet of Monarchia, if I remember right. No, it was not.
That's the Aurelian dude. Quick Google search.
Olympia. Okay. The planet of Olympia actually went into a rebellion led by his own sister, his own adoptive sister, because when he arrived, and he ended up killing his sister in the end. But when he arrived, his sister pretty much showed to him, "You have drained this planet from every fucking male you could. Like, I see dozens of women without fathers, without brothers, without any kind of perspective for marriage. You are draining us out of blood just to fuel your crusade and such." And it ended up creating a rebellion into his own planet led by his own sister. So, and by removing that, removing Perturabo and the others that were using very questionable ways of actually recruiting. The problem with Night Lords and Kurz in general was the Kurz chose to recruit his Space Marines from the worst fucking people that ever lived on Nostromo. They were all pretty much to the level of criminals and psychopaths that he was, at least in the beginning. Like, the others were still criminals and such, or or anything, but he was pretty much taking the worst elements of his planet to be in his army.
Right. So Conrad Curse is basically conscripting from Alcatraz kind of
Yeah.
thing. He's, it's just like murderers, rapists, people that enjoy flaying and hurting other people. It's not even so much always for a righteous cause to be like a weapon of terror for the emperor. Like at some point they're just like, I mean, that's why it's dark humor in their lore and books a lot, because they're just like sadistic, weird people. And there's really good story arcs. It's not just all like, it's complicated. It's like people, what happens, like Sid. Imagine Sid from Toy Story. He's like, he likes torturing toys and doing crazy shit. It's like, what's his story? What's his internal monologue? Like that kind of thing. That's what you're getting with Conrad Curse and the Night Lords. They are fascinating. Some people like Bricky, he loves them to death. I don't look at them as moral lighthouses for me in my code, but they show elements of the human spirit that are like what happens when we're really envious and torturous to ourselves and others, and willing to do anything to kind of get our way, and cowardly, because their whole trip is like they never engage and they like run from fights and stuff and try to stay in the shadows and like scare, like spook you to death basically. All right, we're gonna keep going. So next up is the 9th Legion. Sanguinius literally has angel wings. He's beautiful. He's kind of the counterpart to Conrad. Conrad can see the future and he's like, I can't do shit about it, and he's nihilistic about it, whereas Sanguinius is like, I can see the future, specifically his own death, but he knows it's like for some higher purpose, so he's kind of like an idealist, right? And he's got the blood angels, who are essentially space vampires. Their whole lore is crazy. They've got all sorts of deep, heavy, cool lore, but imagine like Interview with a Vampire with angel wings. Basically.
Yeah, that is actually my favorite legion of all of them. I love the Blood Angels, and especially Sanguinius, for the duality of character that his own Space Marines and even himself showed throughout the Horus Heresy and even now in the 31st Millennium. For the simple fact that when Sanguinius was rediscovered, his own legion, that at the time was named the Revenant Legion, were to the level of being, if not cursed, more like the World Eaters of Angron. They were monsters that enjoyed killing and mutilating people, and they were pretty happy of being in the middle of bloodshed and battle all the time,
and eating their brains afterwards and all that.
Yeah, so Sanguinius took one look at them and said, okay, this is bullshit, let's make things my way. He started pretty much slowly influencing his legion to change their ways to the point of becoming extremely noble warriors that they are even now in 40k. But this pretty much hides their second side, because at the same time that they're fighting battles on the outside, they're fighting battles even on the inside.
Right.
During the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, there was only one curse that the Blood Angels suffered from. After the Horus Heresy, there is two, which are the Red Thirst and the Black Rage. The Red Thirst is pretty much a temporary state of berserkering that they can enter into because they drink blood. So if there is blood on the battlefield, if they are wounded, if they are in an extremely stressful situation and such, they might just lose control and start attacking anyone they can and start drinking their blood.
Like blood rage, blind rage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second one instead is the Black Rage. The Black Rage is a lot worse. It is a madness that transcends space and time, pretty much a warp-born disease that happened after the death of Sanguinius. Now, Sanguinius was not a psyker per se, but he was very psychic sensitive when it came to his own warriors. He had a connection to the to the Blood Angels to the point that he could feel them die on the battlefields. When he died against Horus, because he was actually killed by Horus Lupercal in the final battle on the Vengeful Spirit, he sent pretty much a shockwave behind, like back to his own warriors, and that sent them into a rage state known as the Black Rage, that pretty much sent them into berserker mode against allies and enemies, to the point that even weeks after the Siege of Terra had ended, some of his warriors were still found around mutilating corpses of the enemies, screaming the name of Horus, and just cutting corpses to pieces, pretty much. There was nothing left to fight. That is the level of rage they had when Sanguinius died.
It's one of those things that's a meme, where, it's like, oh, hey, buddy. It's like, you're Horus. And the guy's like, I'm not Horus. Because they literally have the echo of the event in their psyches and blood so deeply that they're like teleported to first person trauma, basically. And they're like living the trauma of the death of their gene sire, their
Yeah,
father.
pretty much the way I interpret it is that the hate of Sanguinius for Horus was so powerful in his last moments because of what had happened, the amount of people that had died, the amount of Astartes that had died, especially some Blood Angels, that the level of emotion he emitted pretty much transcends the warp in space and time, and through the warp enters his own warriors even 10,000 years after the events happened. Because the Black Rage is pretty much a disease that no warrior that descends from the blood of the angel can avoid, and in which once you fall, you cannot come back out from. Once you fall to the Black Rage, you are put actually in something that is called the Death Company, in which you are pretty much sent in a battle in the first line in a suicide mission to die, because there is no other way to bring you back, and at that point you are a berserker attacking allies and foes. You are not worth
You're like a
anything.
lithium battery that's on fire. It's like there's nothing we can do about this. Just put them out on the front line.
Yeah,
We're gonna keep going just because there's so much. I mean,
No,
as
like,
you get,
I'll just make one single observation just to make people
go for
understand why they're so noble. Like, generally, when it comes to the other warriors of 40k, this is not true, but when it comes to the fighters of the blood, when it comes to the gene seed of the blood, how it works is pretty much when they're fighting a battle on the outside, they're also fighting a battle on the inside. They are actually a two-sided medal. They are noble warriors on the outside, monsters on the inside.
yeah, they're
They need to
fighting a
keep,
demon basically.
Yeah, they need to keep their own psyche and their own pretty much inside demon and madness into check, because the moment they let go of that fight just to fight on the outside, on the inside, or whatever, they pretty much fall to that madness instantly. Like, it is even explained in the book of Devastation of Baal that it is not even something like metaphorical. It is not that they fall to madness. It is something they have to constantly fight against, because like there is a passage in the Devastation of Baal book when a single sanguinary guard member is left on a planet filled with tyrannid with no way to escape, that it just says that it pretty much is an observation that he just lets himself go. He lets himself be taken by the Black Rage just so he can kill as many as he can before he dies.
So I think part of that is because they're like doing so much blood stuff that like they have Khorne's blessing without knowing it, right? So that like they could always slip basically into the power of Khorne. Is that kind of what's going on there?
Yeah. And what happens is they're pretty much fighting on the outside against the enemies of the Imperium as noble warriors to protect the Imperium of Men and its citizens, because they are actually one of the few legions and now chapters that actually cares about the humans of the Imperium of Men. And on the inside, they are constantly fighting to not lose control and start slaughtering the people they're protecting, because it actually happens in the book of Dante, where to defend a bunker, he loses control because the situation was very dire. He snaps like in a red vision. And when he comes back again, pushed away from an angelic figure, which is the Sanguinor, he finds out that he has not only slaughtered the entirety of the bunker of civilians, but the only survivor was actually the planetary governor that was looking at him wounded and with open eyes, as he has snapped the neck of his young daughter to drink her blood. He was with the neck of his young daughter still in his mouth, snapped as she dangled from his mouth.
Grim dark.
Yeah, and he was so traumatized by that he pretty much swore and actually kept his word to never drink human blood again. And he didn't do it until the end of the Dante's book, where his own servant cuts his own wrist, and he's like, in my last moment, I have one desire, drink it. And yeah.
Cool. And there's so much lore to this stuff. You guys, like, we're just giving you, like, you know, lick the cupcake, but there's an all-you-can-eat buffet for this stuff. Trust me. So yeah, basically, Sanguinius and the Blood Angels are vampires who are stoic statesmen. It's like, imagine your senator. He's doing great and being a good guy for you, but like, if he really wanted to be an evil person, he's fighting that internal struggle all the time. All right. So Ferrus Manus in the 10th, the Iron Hands. We kind of touched upon it earlier. He's one of the Primarchs that starts the whole. I mean, he's like a victim of the Horus heresy and this huge betrayal, but basically he gets his head cut off by Fulgrim in his sword, and his legion is kind of impotent and smaller, generally speaking, for that. Interesting guy. He's like a biker.
Just one observation. Diedrich, the Wolfen is not a curse. It is actually a genetical mutation. It happens on some of the Marines, but not all of them. It is more of a genetical thing than really something they need to fight against constantly. It is not a state of mind. It is a literal genetical mutation. So they
got the dog gene, so they howl at the moon sometimes, whereas the Blood Angels are like, I'm fighting my inner demons in Khorne's blood lust or whatever. All right, so yeah, there's not a whole lot to say about Ferrus Manus and the Iron Hands. I mean, I love them. I think their lore is cool because basically they're the most like techno infused. They're willing to like their whole thing. I forget them. The flesh is weak, right? They're like,
Yeah.
the less human flesh and air we can have, the better. So we're gonna just like replace our bodies with tech and be awesome. I'm gonna cough, but feel free to talk.
Like generally, the Iron and Ferrus Manus were the most tech adepts of the Space Marines, and they believed actually that technology could be superior to flesh when it came to mechanical replacements and such. To the point that, but it was a message that they actually got wrong from Ferrus Manus, because Ferrus Manus was never like, oh yeah, cut off your leg and replace it with a mechanical one, or cut off your arm and replace it with a mechanical one. It was more like, yeah, we can
Purify yourselves, kind of thing.
yeah, we can make like we can make it with our own bodies, but if we cannot, we can just rely on technology. And in fact, technically, the full quote is the flesh is weak but resilient. But yeah, they just took the part the flesh is weak. So
yeah, and I mean they've got a great a few characters that are really good. The guy in that, I forget what the book is called, but that pyramid of stone where they can see through time or whatever and talk to Reboot. You know what I'm talking about. But basically, there's one dude, I forget his name, Diamantes maybe or something like that. That is cool. So I mean, I think they're cool. I mean, all of these guys are cool in my book. All right, so yeah, Ferrus Manus though, he dies early on, so there's not a whole lot of lore on him, or a lot less than others. He just isn't around the story so much. They could beef it up, and I'm sure there's backstory to fill, but he is dead. His skull is on Horus's ship at the end. I mean, he's dead kind of thing. I think even Conrad Kurz is possibly fucking with his body or soul or something like that at some level. All right, so the 11th is an unknown. So the 2nd and the 11th are like lost Primarchs, lost legions. We don't talk about them. They're scrubbed from history, which kind of leaves room for gamers and players to create their own legions in that sense. I think that's part of the logic there in terms of the tabletop gameplay. It's like, hey, you can do your own thing. But
I mean, you can just watch my video on the Ranked Xenocides to know what happened to them. My theory was
I've got homework.
Yeah, was actually the first one of its kind that offered at least circumstantial proof that I was saying was true. So
that's what's up. All right, we're gonna rip through these because we're kind of running out of time. I know, Raphael, you've been quiet, but I know imbibing quite a bit here. So yeah, the 11th is the unknown. Pio, I love you, and I know you're having fun, even though you're quiet.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just keep drinking the huffing the fumes here. So Angron is funny. He's the 12th, the World Eaters. Basically, think of a guy in a gladiatorial pit on a world like that who's like, yay, we're going to revolt Spartacus style. And basically, they have dreadlocks that are mechanized torture devices from this world that cause them to be neurologically angry. Like
yeah,
they can't not be.
the butcher nails. The butcher nails were implanted into the
That's
brain
his
of
demon
Angron.
form. We're looking at that in the image. That's his demon Primarch form after he falls to chaos.
The butcher nails were pretty much a remnant of the Dark Age of technology. It was a replacement for part of the brain that induced an extreme bloodlusty rage into the person that
the amygdala, probably fight or flight. This is the fight all the way.
And what they will do, it will be pretty much, they will keep Angron in constant pain and derangement, and the only moment he could find peace was in the middle of war and slaughter. It was the thing they did. They were implanted into Angron because he refused to fight in the arena of Nuceria, which was the planet he landed on, because he was a slave gladiator on Nuceria. He refused to fight his own father figure, that was another gladiator of the gladiatorial pits of Nuceria, and the lords of Nuceria implanted him with the butcher nails to force him to fight against his own father figure. And after that, his own psyche and brain became completely damaged to the point that he went from probably the most empathetic Primarch, surpassing even Vulcan, to just being a bloodlusty berserker that will not care about anything or anyone, to the point that during battles he will slaughter his own Marines because he didn't care that they were in the way. So
he's just so angry, Angron. I mean, it's a little funny at that level, but he clearly gets involved with Khorne, and he becomes basically a representative for Khorne. Blood for the Blood God, skulls for the Skull Throne, and anybody in his crew is kind of running around hand-to-hand combat, melee combat, tearing you from limb to limb. Super bloody, super angry, super basic in a sense. They're not like philosophers, although one of them is very well represented in the Fabius Bile trilogy. I forget his name right now, so he's a little smarter, and he carries around the skulls of his dead brothers who talk to him. But anyway, all these guys have books and cool stuff. We're gonna keep going. Robert Gilliman, in the Ultramarines, he's kind of like the it's cliche, the Boy Scout kind of, right? This like the Clark Kent of the situation. He wants to do right, have good strategy, super smart, super by the books, the codex, right? And yeah, say whatever you want about him.
Yeah, generally, Ifangron actually landed on Space Rome. Robuter also landed in Space Rome, but he landed on the side of nobility. He was found by Conor Gilliman on the planet of Macragge, which was one of the rulers of the planet of Macragge and the small empire that was Ultramar at the time, because it was one of the few coalition of planets that still endured in the dark night of the galaxy after the fall of the Human Federation. And he will pretty much grow up to be a tactician, a warrior. He will be taught the ways of empathy by his mother, Tarasha Eoten. He will pretty much shape his own marines to be the best at logistics they could, to keep things functioning as fast and as efficiently as possible, to the point that he had actually the biggest legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, arriving at almost 500,000 Space Marines. He had the most stable gene seed, and generally was the most jack of all trades commander. He was not bloodlusty. He was logic above everything and efficiency above everything. So
honorable, super smart.
Yeah.
So, he's just like a straight up a good guy. I mean, some people, Space Marines, when you see pictures of them, typically are going to be these blue dudes. That's the Ultramarines. Typically, they're kind of the poster child. Not only because they have the numbers, but because I think they just have the least baggage. They're not psychic all the time. They're not, vampires fighting their own demons or whatever. They're basically just like you said, aristocratic kind of warriors who want to build a better world, and they'll use the sword to do that. But they really wanted to just like enjoy the fruits of their labor. I mean, he was excited.
To the point that while he was away on a conquest, when his father was killed, he came back, and instead of putting everything to the torch, found proof of who had killed him and put them to trial, and then condemned them to death on trial. So
right. Somebody, Radiant Gus, said that is what happens when you have a normal child. Yeah, he's like the most normal, basically, in the sense of that. All right, so I like I said, I love all these guys. Some people give shit to the Smurfs, the Blue Space Marines, and say they're just too goody two shoes and all this stuff. Everybody has their own value. I mean, whether it's a world eater going berserk to a ultramarine kind of saving people for his sacrificing themselves to save some innocent kids or whatever. All right, so we got a few more, but we'll wrap up there. We haven't even touched on like what is the Mechanicus and all this shit. But
it is a very long lore.
I know so much, and it's like a world where people can get into it. Raphael, I know we're getting into the 2 hour mark, so we'll try to wrap this up quick. But Mortarion, fabulous, Grim Reaper style. His story is amazing. Mortarion and the Death Guard, they're kind of slow and steady, wins the race, but they are tenacious and like bulletproof kind of guerrillas.
They're renowned to be extremely resilient, especially to toxic battlefields and
hence his breathing mask.
They were renowned for their resilience in difficult battlefields, and they were used mostly for that. And in fact, they ended up technically not wanting to fall to chaos, but they were a bit forced when Commander Typhon, that was a latent psyker discovered by Primarch Mortarion, will pretty much allow Mortarion and the Legion to fall into a trap and be pretty much tortured by Nargol, to the point that for Mortarion it was either listening to the screams of his own soldiers and sons being tortured for eternity, or just seed and become a champion of Nargol. And he seeded and became a champion of Nargol. So this is now Chaos Primarch Mortarion of Nargol.
Right. So if you guys like zombies and like body horror and people like dying, rotting, reanimating, coming back, all that kind of stuff, this is that crew. They are nasty. It's the most gory kind of writing that has to, in terms of just like blood, pus, rot, that kind of stuff, because Grandfather Nurgle, Papa Nurgle, is their patron saint or whatever, patron god, and basically they don't die like in a real way. They're kind of like Night of the Living Dead, like on steroids. Fascinating character though, and his book, The Buried Dagger and stuff like that, really good stuff's in there. Magnus the Red, I for a long time I had like identified with this and loved them so much, and I don't really pick one at all now. But Magnus in the 15th, he's basically this cycloptic psyker, imagine Egyptian vibes, They're super mystical and woke as fuck in terms of knowing about the warp. They're very aware of the warp. But basically he in trying to save his dad, breaks through a barrier that causes hell to break loose on Earth. Basically, that's a very quick synopsis.
Yeah, pretty much what happened was Magnus was the most psychically gifted of all the children of the Emperor. He was a psyker second pretty much only to the Emperor and maybe even to Malkador, but that was never confirmed. He was extremely powerful, extremely wise, to the point that all Magnus wanted really was knowledge. It was why he was so curious about the warp and such. Even his own legion even his legion had the highest amount of psychers than any other legion. The point is that there was a defect on their own gene seed, and Chaos Corruption was already starting, where they were mutating with a syndrome called the Flesh Change, where they pretty much turned into warp spawn. So if they use their powers too much, or if they went too far into the knowledge of the warp, it was pretty much a mutation that only Magnus could quell. And the only reason Magnus actually fell to Chaos was that after the actions that broke the human webway and the project of the Emperor, because Magnus was trying to warn the Emperor that Horus had betrayed and had fallen to Chaos, the Legion of Riemann Ras was actually sent to apprehend him, but Horus changed the order at the last second, because at that point he was already the War Master, from arrest Magnus to kill Magnus. And the Liman Ras and the Space Wolves arrived on the planet of the sorcerers of Magnus, and pretty much burned it to the ground. There was fighting everyone on the planet, killed all of the human population, killed a bunch of the Marines of both sides, and in the end, the back of Magnus was actually broken by Liman in a duel. And at that point, because Magnus knew that his legion and himself were damned, he made a pact with Tzeentch and pretty much became a Chaos Primarch of the Chaos God Tzeentch.
Right. And something that is the tragic part of this is like the guys who are the Thousand Sons and on their planet, which I'm forgetting the name of all of a sudden. Basically, they had the Library of Alexandria kind of thing. They had all this acquired magical knowledge. They knew the secrets of the universe. They were so fucking woke and hip and like kind of like how we look at ancient Egypt, where it's like we don't even know what they were doing or whatever. Like the mythology kind of around Atlantis. Think that way. And so they were just these super high magicians. And the idea is that if you play with fire, you get burned. He was playing with chaos and the warp enough where it fucked him over in the end. Very tragic story arcs here. I mean, these aren't people that are evil straight up. Some people are more sinister and dark or whatever naturally, like Conrad. Whereas this guy was like a philosopher magician who basically became aware of the dark side of the Force and then kind of turned to the Sith in that sense.
So I don't know how much farther we have to go with all
3 or 4,
so
nothing long.
The list.
Nothing long.
No, just what I want to know in between is how many of those actually got corrupted in that storyline? All of them, or did
half
any?
of them basically?
No,
Okay.
technically, of all the 20, only 18. Well, of all the 20, technically, only 18 were found. Even if we count Omegon, that becomes 19, and if we count the Angel, that becomes 20. Of the 18 that were officially found, 9 fell to Chaos and 9 stayed loyal. So
yeah, so you get kind of a split where it's like, do you want to be good guys or bad guys? Kind of vibes in the game part. So they flesh it out super hard. This won't take but like 5 or 10 minutes, maybe. Raphael, we'll wrap it up. Don't worry. We're at 16. There's only 20. So really quick, 16, Horus Lupercal, the Sons of Horus, or the Luna Wolves originally. Basically, think Patton or George Washington or some awesome general that is like, everyone looks up to them and is like, you're the man, we trust you, your charisma and sheer power of self-belief is going, it's just like this person that everyone believes in and kind of like says they can do it. Super strong, super, strategic, smart, whatever. He's the one with he's the right-hand man of the Emperor. He's like the favored son, basically. And he takes up the mantle of the Emperor when the Great Crusade ends and the Emperor's going to go work on the Webway, which is a long project of the story. But basically he falls to chaos. This is what starts the descent into the madness that is 40K is through the rise and fall of Horus Lupercal. It's a very
it is why it is called the Horus Heresy, because it is actually beginned by Horus. So
Erebus, really, let's be real. It's, in a sense, he was just on the operating table and it kind of went that way. But he's super charismatic, super interesting guy, but like Lex Luthor meets Napoleon or something like that, where it's just like everybody thought he was cool and good, but imagine like the best of us turning to the the dark side. It's like it's not good. That's a very quick synopsis, but super, brutal, shock and awe tactics. Their legion is like, the creme de la creme. Everyone's like, holy shit, they're awesome. And then when they fall, it's like, oh god damn it, if they're gonna fall, like there's no hope. It would be like if, I can give analogies upon analogies, but it's like the best idea, King Arthur going to the dark side or something. It's like, holy shit, this isn't how this is supposed to be. Quickly going through it, 17 Lorgar and the word bearers.
Primarch.
I think he's hilarious. I mean, I don't feel that way about him at all, but I can see why people do. Basically, imagine like a religious zealot who's obsessed with the idea that the emperor, because he's such a psychic person and stuff, you have to realize the setting is like the imperial truth is like science is real and there's no magic and there's no spirits and gods and stuff, but the psychic emperor himself is like dealing with these things and he knows that. So there's kind of a paradox hypocrisy issue. But basically, I mean, you could talk about this. I don't have to, but yeah,
no, like,
Lorgar.
Generally, Lorgar was the most fate inclined of all the Primarchs. He was
He's
looking
like a missionary. He's like, I will tell you the word.
His planet was pretty much covered in religious temples and symbols to the point that he came up the same way. And what would happen was that when he was approached by the Emperor, he pretty much saw in the Emperor the god he was looking to worship. But while the Emperor tolerated his belief, he was never really part of it. And when he found out that Lorgar was he was very slow at conquering planets, because after he conquered them, he spent time to actually convert the people on the planets he conquered to the religion of the Emperor, where they would venerate the Emperor as a god. And the Emperor was very much against any kind of religion, especially if it involved him.
Party foul.
Yeah, he pretty much called Robute Gilliman and the Ultramarines, reached the capital planet of Lorgar, which was Monarchia, and ended up burning it to the ground. When the word bearers and Lorgar returned, the Emperor forced all of them to kneel and pretty much destroy the entirety of the belief of Lorgar in front of everyone about the fact that the Emperor was a god and such, and pretty much called him childish and stupid for even believing something like this. At that point, the word bearers would retreat from the crusade with pretty much having their own version of super depression. When they came back, they had found other gods to venerate.
Well, it's
gods
tricky.
that
Go
were,
ahead. It's one of those things where it's like the Emperor's like, I'm not a god, fuck you. And he's like, well, there's power here. There's real psychic things. I'm going to pursue this. I'm going to figure this out. So
pretty much a god must exist. If it is not you, it will be somebody else. And they actually found the chaos gods, and in fact, they have not fallen to a specific chaos god. They have fallen to chaos undivided, which is a very rare state in which they pretty much follow all chaos gods at once.
Hail Eris, like on steroids, Raphael.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically imagine, like, I don't know, a missionary being like, here's the word of Jesus Christ and something, and Jesus or whatever, this figure is like, do not preach this, fuck you. And then they're like, well, I still have this zealous nature and this worshipful kind of desire. I'm going to find whoever takes my worship, I'm going to worship. So they find the chaos gods and kind of corrupt from there. 3 more, and then we're done with this, and we'll just wrap it up there. Vulcan, he's a salamander. Basically they're pitch black and have red eyes and are like smithies, almost like they work with making tools and stuff. There he is with his hammer that it's a teleportation device too, and all sorts of crazy stuff. Makes great artifacts. Say what now? It's also a hammer. Oh yes, that's a great quote. See, if you know, you know. Conrad kind of forgets that point. He gets trapped in one of Perturabo's mazes, basically, and tortured psychologically because he's indestructible. So if he dies, like, he comes back.
Yeah, Vulcan is a perpetual. If he dies, he can just come back.
Yeah,
it can take some time, but he can.
So he gets tortured by Conrad for fun. Conrad Kurz for a while. Interesting little tour there. But basically, these guys are like the nice guys. They're the most human friendly.
They're actually technically they have the most relic equipment, but for the simple fact that they are actually like the most inclined to working on their own weapons and equipment. Like generally, Vulcan landed on Nocturne, where he was raised by a blacksmith and eventually became king of the planet because he was a fucking Primarch. But generally now all of the Space Marines of the Salamanders are brought away from Nocturne, and they are always they're always always teach that there is nothing more sacred than human life in the galaxy of 40k, to the point that it is not unheard of space marines of the salamanders actually sacrificing themselves for humans, which is completely unheard of in many other places of 40k and for many other factions. And generally, they are some of the few that also retain contact with their own descendants and pretty much their own families, to the point that when they are on their own planet, they spend times with their descendants and their families, like their own grandnieces and such. And in all of this, they are still, while they're still very capable warriors and have very much a lot of relic equipment, because by belief of Vulcan, they actually grew to be extremely great artisans, especially for war machines. They're also pretty much embedded. They have embedded in their own brains the word empathetic. They try in every way possible to make the life of humans as bearable as possible on the battlefields they fight on, to the point that, for example, during the wars for Armageddon, they were the only ones that actually defended the water purification plants of various hive cities, because no other marine fucking cared about it, and they were like, if the orcs destroy this, all the humans in the city will die of thirst, and they just sent men to defend them and keep the orcs away.
They're super humble, super compassionate is like the word you're saying, super empathic. I mean, essentially all these space marines and the Primarchs are tools to save humanity, and most of them don't remember that. They get absorbed in their personalities and their ambitions and all this stuff, and hubris and machinations for glory or whatever. Vulcan is the most humble, the most for the cause, and the most and obviously salamanders are the most willing to, like you said, lay down their lives for humans, and we're not superhumans. Two more, and then we'll call it a day, Raphael. Sorry. Corax is the leader and Gene sire of the Ravenclaw. They are straight up like emo. Yeah, Raven. What did I say? I don't even know what I said. They're like emo. I mean, super moody, like emo shadow warriors, basically. Like they're like the night.
Let's take it from another way. They're more comparable to Curse, but if Curse was more neutral on the side of just, like, generally mutilating people.
Sadistic. He wasn't sadistic. Yeah.
Corvus Corax actually ended up landing on a prison planet that I don't remember the name of right now. He ended up leading a rebellion that freed the prisoners of the planet against the aristocrats that were keeping them there, even for doing nothing. And he's an expert in the ways of stealth and in the way of covert fighting, to the point that, like, there is entire memes about just empty roads, and there is written on it, you're assisting to a battle between the Night Lords and the Raven Guard, and there is just nothing, because they're both experts in actually covert operations and stealth fighting. But generally, while they might not be the most empathetic and such, they are the experts of stealth of 40k, and they pretty much believe in punishing the enemies of the Imperium. In fact, to the point that technically Corvus Corax is lost in the warp because he's hunting down Lorgar, because he wants to kill Lorgar personally. And his own sons, while they face some problems with their own genes because of mutations. In fact, pretty much all of the Raven Guard have grey skin and black eyes, because it is the way they were born. And generally, they specialized in stealth fights against the enemies of the Imperium, to the point that usually by the time you notice that you are being attacked, you have already lost. That is the point they are on.
Yeah, and they have this very My Chemical Romance kind of moody emo vibe. I mean, like think The Crow or something like that. It's like super dark, super moody emo vibes. Last but not least is the 20th, and there's kind of a Gemini plurality here. Alpharius and Omegon. So Alpha and Omega are the twin Primarchs, potentially, or not potentially, of the last Legion, the 20th, and they are the Alpha Legion, Hail Hydra, or whatever. They're great.
Alpharius and Omegon are pretty much a bit of a mystery in 40k, for the simple fact that they are technically smaller than other Primarchs, but their Marines at the same time are bigger, to the point that they can pretty much confuse themselves into the Marines of their Legion without any kind of problem. It is why, like, during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, all Marines of the Alpha Legion would undergo operations to look exactly like their Primarchs and change their name into Alpharius, which literally is hell, because if you read even just Deliverance Lost, there is a problem, because there is multiple characters called Alpharius, and you're left a bit confused to who the fuck is talking to whom. But generally, they are experts into infiltration and covert fighting, to the point that you cannot really know who you're fighting by the time you're fighting somebody. Like, it could be Primarch Alpharius, could not. You will find that Marines in your own squad are not really Marines of your own Legion even. They are Marines of the Alpha Legion that have disguised themselves and infiltrated your Legion. It is what happened to Robute Gilliman shortly before the Horus Heresy erupted in full force, where a squad of Marines that technically was dead went to see him in his chambers, and when they didn't remove their helmets, Robute saw that there was something weird, and then it was revealed that the entire squad was fucking Alpha Legion infiltrators that ended up creating a battle in his own bedrooms, and he had to kill all of them in just ceremonial armor. He was not even armed. He killed them barehanded.
The desk was ruined.
Yeah, and other than that, there is also the Revenants Lost, where Alpharius himself was hiding between the members of the cadre of Corvus Corax's fortress, and other than that, there were various members of the Raven Guard that were covert operation Alpha Legion officers. And yeah, pretty much their stake is you don't know who the fuck you're fighting, if it's the Primarch or not, and at the same time you cannot trust either the guy you're fighting with or the guy fighting next to you, because he could be Alpharius, he could be an Alpha Legionnaire and such, because they are very good at disguising themselves as other legions. So
yeah, masters of disguise. It's kind of like I mean, this is a weird analogy, but like Agent Smith in the Matrix, where it's like you never, which one's the real one and which one's the copy. There's just like millions of them, and they're all about subterfuge, and they're playing 5D chess. You never really know which side. I mean, they could say that I'm on your side, but they're working against you. They could say I'm against you, and they're actually on your side. You never really know what's going on with the Alpha Legion.
And there is also a theory that actually the Alpha Legion is split in half. There was the Alpha Legion that was on the side of Alpharius, that actually wanted the heresy and wanted to fight against the Emperor because of the Cabal and their predictions and such. But there is also the theory that the side that was on the other Primarch, the Shadowy one, Omegon, was actually not really that convinced of fighting against the Imperium of Men, to the point that technically Alpharius is considered a Chaos Renegade, but Omegon really isn't. There is a theory that Omegon is actually leading the loyalist members of the Alpha Legion into the Chaos Legion, so to try and disrupt their plans so that they do not win against the Imperium of Men. So
yeah, they're like spies, basically. Spies with a lot of intrigue and double crossing, and covert spies, and who's a double crosser and double agent and all this stuff. They're double agents, even two of them, double agent, right? So I know we've covered a lot. People's heads are probably exploding if you've never even heard of the 40K, and if you're a geek of 40K, this might have been very kind of simple stuff, but it's always fun to kind of geek out on this. And y'all, there's obviously so much more. We never got into the Mechanicum or what the Tyranids are, or Eldari past a point, but maybe one day we can geek out on that kind of stuff, permitting that you guys want to come back on, or
it's not a problem. We actually covered we covered the Space Marines in detail in a video called "What is a Space Marine," where in an hour and 10 minutes we explain everything about Space Marines, their physiology, their creation, their background history-wise. We covered the missing Primarchs in the video "The Rangdan Xenocides." We covered a giant civil war called the Badab War, that is the second biggest civil war after the Horus Heresy. We covered heresies that nobody ever heard of, like the Catalexis Heresy. And now in the newest video we are making, we even covered the Abyssal Crusade, which was a fucking mess. But the newest video that is coming tomorrow in premiere is actually about the Macarian Crusade and Lord Solar Macarius, which was the greatest human imperial commander that ever lived in 40K, and the legend he built for himself in war and fire, and the tragic end he faced. And do you want to know how much misinformation there is behind the end of the story of Macarius? To the point that the wikis are wrong, and the other lore YouTubers have never mentioned really what happened. I am the first one to do so.
That's what's up. I mean, what a Leo. You're gonna do it. And you've got a Capricorn backing you. Someone just says, I was here only for Pio. Pio, silent but present always. And I mean, I think that's part of your
while he's evading taxes.
Well, it's like Penn and Teller, right? Like one is loud and one is quiet, and they together their forces combined. Guys, you're both interesting, and I love that what you're doing. Obviously, if you give a mouse a cookie, kind of thing. Like this is a whole rabbit hole that I find super entertaining. Like I said, it saved my life from depression in terms of just reading the lore and getting inspired. It's very inspiring literature, very well written. It's not bullshit. It's like beautifully written stuff. It's not all just bolter porn, though there's that with violent kind of militaristic kind of moments. There's intrigue, there's romance, there's, I mean, you name it, it's there. probably less romance, but you get my point. Thanks for giving us your time and energy. I'm really stoked that you came on here. I've been trying to get you on here for a while, Danny. So thank you for capitulating. Pio, like I said, like it's like a statue in the library. It adds to the overall aesthetic. It was necessary. Your presence was necessary. I hope you guys keep up the good work. You're putting out quality stuff and turning people on to the facts of the lore, which is what I'm all about. So, I mean, I'll say my last little shtick, Raphael, if you want to wrap up. But basically, guys, find the others. Look, there's geeks, nerds, and everything, and it doesn't matter if it's flat Earth theories, which I'm not into, but everything under the sun has a rabbit hole, including little books called Warhammer 40K, which, as you can see, are very deep, very replete, and there's people that can go deeply down them well. So good on you, Danny and Pio. Yeah, it's about finding the others. Find your tribe and have fun with it.
Yeah, thank you. We surely will. It is why we make videos, after all. We needed to spare out to somebody, so the internet was the best place.
It is.
But
Well,
yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know this was just drive by and probably like, not boring to y'all, but like, hey, this is like, talking about, I don't know, how to tie a knot if you're like a sailor. Like, this isn't the most, you're talking about the basics, but some people don't know it, and I wanted to hear your take on it anyway. And this seemed like the most reasonable place to start for helping Raphael see the rabbit hole.
Thank you so much for giving a first insight. Let's say I wasn't really aware, although I recognized some things because I told you I had played the fantasy variants of it, and apparently some of the gods, they are truly eternal, like they carry over.
Yeah,
things like that. Other than that, and we're not going to get into this now, maybe one day we'll understand more, just like with Game of Thrones or many other things. First of all, many ideas reminded me of Dune, actually, which is interesting. It's always interesting to know where it's inspired from. And ultimately, I'm also interested what are potentially, real egregores or even events or proclivities that are fictionalized in this story. I won't start on that now on any ideas or conjecture on that, but of course that's something I'm interested in. There's some obvious references, and I'm sure there's a lot more which are not that obvious.
Well, so many. Council
if you have such a huge lore, I'm pretty sure someone even said people have no imagination. The story is always repeating, but we can say that's about so many stories. But I guess there's few universes that appear at least to be as fleshed out as this one.
That's why I love it so much.
Interesting.
That's definitely why.
So thank you. Thank you again, guys.
Yeah.
Well, then jump on tomorrow to learn about the true story of Macarius. Then the video will be 1 hour long, but it took we even collaborated with various people to make it the highest quality possible. Like there is not one but 2 cameos of other YouTubers, and one of them is a Vox in the Void. So.
Nice. That's what's up. Yeah, it's a royal we thing. You guys are doing awesome stuff. So props to you. Keep up the good work. I'll definitely check out some more videos. Everybody, if you want to kind of go down these rabbit holes without necessarily reading the books, you can do it this way. And yeah, guys, thank you so much again for your time.
No problem.
Thanks to you.
Have fun, guys. Bye.
Thank you, guys. And
Okay,
thanks
bye.
everyone for listening and watching. As always, thank you, Jim. Everyone, enjoy yourselves.